Hey guys, tonight we travel back to a London shrouded in gaslight and coal smoke, a city of immense wealth and desperate poverty, existing side by side on the same cobblestone streets. Imagine the perpetual twilight of a city where the sun is a rumour, blocked out by the smog from a million chimneys. You can almost taste the metallic tang of the air, feel the damp chill seeping through your worn-out shoes, and hear the constant, overwhelming noise. The rumble of iron-rimmed carriage wheels, the cries of street sellers, and the distant mournful whistle of a steam train. This is the Victorian era, but we're not visiting Queen Victoria or attending a fancy ball. Tonight, you are a fallen woman, and your world is one of survival against all odds. Statistically speaking, you probably won't make it out of this story with your health, your sanity, or your life intact. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It's a huge help. And while you're at it, I love seeing where everyone is tuning in from, so drop your city or country and the local time in the comments below. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The memory of home is already starting to feel like a dream, hazy and warm around the edges. You close your eyes for a second against the biting wind whipping down the narrow alley, and you can almost smell it. Wet soil after a spring rain, the sweet scent of hay in the barn, the wood smoke from your family's hearth. Life wasn't easy. No, it was a cycle of hard, physical labour dictated by the sun and the seasons. But it was predictable. It was known. That world vanished the day the letter from the landlord arrived. Or perhaps it was when your father's cough finally stilled his chest for good, leaving your mother with too many mouths and not enough hands. For so many like you, the story starts this way. The great hungry city of London pulls you in with whispers of opportunity. In the country, the old ways are dying. Common lands are being fenced off, and families who have worked the same patch of earth for generations are being pushed out. So you pack your few meagre belongings into a cloth bundle, say a tearful goodbye to a mother who presses a single, precious shilling into your palm, and you make the journey. The train ride itself is a terrifying marvel of noise and speed, rattling your bones and filling your lungs with soot. When you finally step out onto the platform at one of London's sprawling chaotic stations, the sheer scale of the place is a physical blow. Nothing, not the Parsons Tales of Babylon nor the warnings from village elders, could have prepared you for this. The crush of bodies, the chorus of unfamiliar accents, the overwhelming stench, a mix of horse manure, unwashed humanity, and the infamous miasma from the River Thames, which Londoners have basically been using as a giant open sewer for centuries. It's no wonder they called it the Great Stink a few years back. You came here with a simple, honest plan, to find work as a domestic servant, or maybe a seamstress. You're a hard worker, you're good with a needle, and you're desperate. But you quickly learn that 500,000 other girls have the exact same plan. You trudge from door to door, but the positions for maids are all taken, or they require a written reference you don't have. You find a place in a garment workshop, a sweatshop where you sit hunched over for 16 hours a day, stitching shirts until your fingers are raw and your eyes burn in the dim light. At the end of the week, the pittance you're paid is barely enough for a stale loaf of bread and your share of a flea-infested mattress in a room with 5 other exhausted women. It's not a living, it's a slow, methodical starvation. There is no social safety net here, no one to catch you. It's the pinnacle of pull yourself up by your bootstraps, thinking, except you were never issued any boots. Historians still argue whether the primary driver for women entering this life was economic desperation alone or a complex mix of personal trauma, abuse, and a desire for a sliver of autonomy, however fleeting. For you, it's much simpler. It's cold. You've been cold for weeks. The damp has settled deep in your bones, and your hunger is a constant gnawing ache in your belly. You see them on the Strand or in the Haymarket at night. The other women. They wear dresses that are a bit too colourful, their laughter a bit too loud. But they are inside, out of the rain, nursing a glass of gin. They can afford a hot meat pie from a street vendor. The choice, when it comes, doesn't feel like a choice at all. It feels like the last door on a long dark hallway, and the rooms behind you are either the workhouse, a place spoken of in hushed, terrified tones as a prison for the poor, or a slow, anonymous death from exposure. One evening, your money gone, your stomach empty. You watch a carriage splash mud up the leg of a finely dressed gentleman. He curses, but then his eyes meet yours. There is no romance in it, no spark. It is a simple, grim transaction of need and opportunity. You pull your thin shawl tighter around your shoulders, take a deep breath that tastes of coal and rain, and step out of the shadows. The girl from the country is gone. You are now a part of the city's churning nocturnal machinery. That first night on the street leaves you hollowed out, scoured clean of any lingering innocence. The shilling the man pressed into your hand feels both impossibly heavy and utterly worthless. It bought you a stale meat pie, and a night in a lodging house so crowded you had to sleep sitting up, back pressed against the damp wall, your small bundle clutched to your chest. But the real cost was something you can't quite name, a piece of your spirit chipped away forever. You now understand that survival on the street is a game of chance you will eventually lose. Every shadow holds a threat. Every approaching footstep sends a spike of fear through your heart. It's not sustainable. You need walls. You need a door that locks. Another girl, shivering in a doorway and sharing a swig from a hidden flask of cheap gin, is the one who gives you the address. She speaks of a Mrs. Gray on a certain street not far from the Strand. She's hard, the girl says, her voice raspy, but the place is clean, and the coppers mostly leave her be. The advice is given freely, a small act of solidarity in a world that encourages none. So, with that name and street committed to memory, you spend the next day gathering your nerve. You use a bit of your precious money to buy a piece of bread and some cheese, wanting to walk in on a stomach that isn't audibly complaining. It's a pathetic attempt to project a sense of stability you're nowhere near feeling. The house, when you find it, is unnervingly respectable. It's a tall, narrow brick building, identical to its neighbours. There are no red lamps, no garish signs. The front steps are scrubbed clean, and the brass knocker in the shape of a lion's head is polished to a gleam. Only the curtains, a deep shade of crimson and drawn tightly closed even in the middle of the afternoon, hint that the business within is not that of a respectable solicitor or a merchant's family. It's a deliberate disguise. Discretion is paramount both for the clients and for avoiding the attention of the more zealous parish constables. Your heart feels like a trapped bird beating against your ribs as you lift the heavy brass lion. The thump-thump it makes against the solid wood door sounds final, like a gavel falling. The silence that follows stretches for an eternity. You're about to turn and flee back to the relative anonymity of the street when the door cracks open. A tired-looking maid, no older than you, gives you a flat, uninterested look. You stammer the name, Mrs. G. Gray? And the girl simply opens the door wider and nods for you to enter. The air inside is thick with the smell of beeswax, stale cigar smoke, and a heavy floral perfume that fails to mask a faint underlying scent of unwashed linen and spilled wine. You're left standing in a dim, chilly hallway, while the maid disappears up a flight of stairs. You wait, twisting the fabric of your worn shawl, your eyes adjusting to the gloom. This is it, the Victorian version of a job interview with a very unique set of key performance indicators. A moment later, a woman descends the staircase. This must be Mrs. Gray. She's perhaps 40, dressed in a fashionable but severe dress of dark green silk that rustles with every step. Her hair is pinned up meticulously, and a string of pearls is clasped a little too tightly around her neck. Her face is powdered, but it can't hide the hard lines etched around her eyes and mouth. She is the embodiment of a failed gentility, a woman who knows the rules of the respectable world and now profits from breaking them in a carefully managed environment. She doesn't smile. She circles you slowly, her sharp eyes taking in every detail. Your worn-out boots, your thin frame, the way you refuse to meet her gaze. "Look at me, girl," she commands, her voice low but carrying an authority you dare not disobey. You lift your chin. She steps closer, tilts your face to the light, and then, with a startling lack of ceremony, uses her thumb to pull. Kate starts to get ready for the evening and you watch, fascinated and terrified. She pulls a tin basin of lukewarm water from under her bed and begins to wash. The ritual is methodical, detached. She's not preparing for a lover, she's preparing for a shift. Historians still argue about the degree of agency these women possessed. Were they passive victims, or did they actively shape their environment, creating subcultures and codes of conduct to survive? Watching Kate, you see both. She is a victim of her circumstances, but her movements are practiced, efficient. She is a professional, navigating the grim requirements of her job. She tells you about the house. Mrs. Gray is called the Governess behind her back. You eat your meals up here in the attic, simple fare like bread and dripping or a thin stew brought up by Polly. Fines are levied for everything: being late, a torn dress, arguing, being seen as morose by a client. The rules are designed to keep you indebted, to keep you compliant. Never let a client see you cry, Kate advises, dabbing her face with a rough cloth. And never, ever steal from them. The Governess will throw you out for that, and you'll have nowhere to go. Later, Polly will bring you a bowl of watery broth and a hunk of bread. You'll eat it sitting on your bed, the taste of it mingling with the dust and despair of the room. From downstairs, you'll hear the faint tinny notes of the pianoforte being tuned. The house is waking up. The performance is about to begin. You look at your small bundle of belongings from your old life, sitting by the foot of your new bed. It looks pathetic, alien. That life is over. This attic, this house, this city, this is your home now. A home with no warmth, a cage with no key. Your meagre bundle of personal clothes is taken from you. Mrs. Gray inspects your simple, country-made wool dress and patched chemise with a look of undisguised contempt. Burn them, she instructs Polly, without a flicker of sentiment. You watch your last connection to your old self being carried away, a lump forming in your throat. You're to be remade in the image of the house. Your transformation from a person into a product begins with the wardrobe. Polly leads you to a large locked cupboard on the second-floor landing. The Governess unlocks it with a key from a ring that jingles at her waist, a sound you will come to associate with authority and judgment. The doors swing open to reveal the house's collection of working clothes. The smell that wafts out is a strange mix of cheap perfume, sweat and cedar chips. It's a wall of colour. Gaudy scarlets, lurid blues and sickly yellows, fabrics that are designed to catch the eye in the dim, forgiving gaslight of the parlour. These are not the elegant, tasteful gowns of society ladies. They are costumes. The materials are cheap imitations, shiny sateen masquerading as silk, coarse lace and glass beads instead of jewels. They are designed to suggest luxury and availability, but up close they are flimsy and poorly made. Many are second-hand, bought from theatrical costumers or the maids of wealthier women, then altered to be more provocative. The necklines are cut daringly low, and the sleeves are short, designed to show off the arms and shoulders. You up another narrower flight of stairs, this one uncarpeted, the wood groaning under your feet. This is the attic, the staff quarters. The difference is shocking. She pushes open a low door and you have to duck to enter. The room is long and narrow, tucked into the eaves of the house. A single grimy dormer window at the far end lets in a weak grey light, offering a lovely panoramic view of a neighbouring brick wall. There are 4 simple iron bedsteads crammed into the space, each with a thin, lumpy mattress and a single coarse wool blanket. A couple of battered wooden chests serve as communal storage. There are no chairs, no pictures, no rugs. The air up here is cold and carries the faint, sour smell of sleep and unwashed bodies. This is your gilded cage, or rather, the distinctly ungilded part of it. 3 of the beds are already occupied, not by sleeping women, but by their belongings, marking their territory. A dress is laid out on one, a book with a lurid cover on another. This cramped shared space is the entirety of your private world. You will sleep here, eat your meals here, and spend your daylight hours here, waiting for the evening to begin. There is no privacy. You will learn the sound of every other woman's breathing, her muttered words in a bad dream, the rustle of her turning over on the squeaking bed frame. Polly points to the one empty bed. "That's yours." She hands you 2 thin, greyish sheets, and a pillowcase that smells faintly of Mrs. Gray's cloying perfume. It's a small, almost laughable luxury. While the clients downstairs demand the illusion of cleanliness and high living, the reality for the women who provide it is one of stark, functional squalor. You sit on the edge of the lumpy mattress. The springs protest with a mournful twang. Looking around the cramped attic, you realise this is no different from the shared room at the sweatshop lodging house, just with a much, much higher price tag attached. You'll soon learn that brothels were often stratified. The most elite, high-class establishments, sometimes called introducing houses, might offer their women private rooms and a degree of comfort. But this is not one of those. This is a mid-tier house, catering to clerks, students and merchants. It prioritises profit over comfort, and the comfort of the workers is the lowest priority of all. A quirky tidbit of the era is the rise of so-called celestial beds, most famously by a quack doctor named James Graham, who charged enormous sums for couples to use a lavish electrified bed that he claimed would cure infertility. The absurdity of such elite theatricality feels a million miles away from the simple iron frame you now call your own. You're not alone for long. The door creaks open and another young woman enters. She's perhaps a few years older than you, with hair the colour of straw and tired, knowing eyes. She nods at you, a quick, appraising glance. "New girl," she states, not unkindly. "I'm Kate. You offer your new name, Alice." She lets out a short, humourless laugh. "Good a name as any. We had an Alice last year. She ended up in the Lock Hospital. It's not meant to be cruel, it's just a statement of fact. A casual mention of the dreaded hospital for venereal disease that hangs over all of you like a shroud, down your lower lip and inspect your teeth. It's a gesture you've seen men use on horses at the market fair." "How old?" she asks. You tell her you're 18, subtracting a year in the vague hope that youth is a valuable commodity here. She grunts, unconvinced but seemingly satisfied. "Any cough? Any sickness?" This question is sharp. Urgent. The Contagious Diseases Acts of the 1860s, a major mainstream concern, gave police the power to arrest any woman suspected of being a prostitute and subject her to a humiliating forced medical examination. An outbreak in her house could mean ruin, so her concern isn't for your well-being, but for her businesses. She asks you to turn around. She assesses your figure, your posture. Historians still argue about the true nature of the relationship between these madams and their workers. Was it a purely transactional evil, or did it contain some twisted, pragmatic element of protection from the chaos of the streets? Standing here under Mrs. Gray's clinical gaze, you feel no protection. You feel like a slab of meat being appraised. She is your new owner, your manager, and your creditor, all rolled into one formidable silk-clad package. There's a strange bit of slang you'll learn later. A flash house is a brothel that doubles as a hangout for thieves. You wonder for a moment if you've landed in one, but the tidy if grim atmosphere suggests not. This is a place of business. Finally, she seems to come to a decision. "You're scrawny, but you're clean-limbed," she declares, as if announcing the winner of a pig competition. "You'll do." She then lays out the terms. You will be provided with room, board, and a wardrobe suitable for evening work. You will not have to pay for it now. Instead, she will open an account for you. The cost of everything, your dresses, your laundry, your meals, even the glass of gin you'll be expected to drink with a client, will be marked against your name. Your earnings will be split, but your debt must be paid to her first. You nod, not fully grasping the financial trap being laid, only hearing the promise of a bed and a meal. You've been accepted. The maid is called to show you upstairs. As you follow her, Mrs. Gray calls out one last thing from the bottom of the stairs. From now on, you're called Alice. Your own name is the first thing she takes from you. The maid, whose name you learn is Polly, leads you up the creaking staircase. As you ascend, the air grows warmer, but also staler. The grand, if gloomy pretense of the ground floor begins to peel away with each step. The runner on the stairs becomes more frayed, the wallpaper more stained. You pass the first landing, which leads to the main parlour. Through the partially open door, you catch a glimpse of what will soon be your workplace. It's a room of suffocating splendour, a riot of red velvet and gold-painted trim. A large, slightly out-of-tune pianoforte stands in one corner, and heavy damask curtains block out any hint of daylight. The room is designed to look opulent to men who have had a few drinks, but in the silence of the afternoon it just looks tired and a little bit sad. This is the public face of the brothel, the stage upon which you will be expected to perform. It's a carefully crafted illusion of luxury and availability, but your new home is not here. Polly leads. The moment you have been dreading arrives with the subtlety of a thrown brick. You're arranged in the parlour with the other women. A tableau of forced ease. Bess is at the pianoforte, hammering out a jaunty tune. Flora is laughing, a little too loudly, at something a portly, red-faced man has said. You're perched on the edge of a velvet settee, your hands clenched in your lap, your painted smile feeling as if it might crack your face in two. Your stomach is a cold, tight knot. A new gentleman enters, stamping the damp from his boots. He hands his coat and hat to Polly. He's neither old nor young, handsome nor ugly. He is utterly terrifyingly average, a man who could be a shopkeeper, a lawyer's clerk, or a minor civil servant. He has a neatly trimmed beard and wears a suit that is respectable but not expensive. His eyes scan the room, passing over the familiar faces of the other women before they land on you. There is a flicker of interest. You are the new curiosity. Mrs. Gray, ever the astute businesswoman, glides to his side. "A new addition to our little family, Mr. Howard," she says, her voice smooth as honey. "Our dear Alice, fresh from the country, and still learning the ways of the city." It's a carefully crafted sales pitch, playing on the popular Victorian trope of the innocent rural girl. The man's eyes linger on you. You feel less like a person and more like a piece of merchandise on display. He nods, a slow, appraising gesture. "Indeed." Mrs. Gray leads him over to the settee. Your heart is pounding so hard you can feel it in your ears, a frantic drumbeat against the tinny sound of the piano. "Alice, dear, why don't you pour Mr. Howard a glass of sherry?" The governess's voice is sweet, but it is an order. Your hands tremble as you pick up the decanter. You remember Kate's instruction. Don't baptize the customers. You manage to pour the drink without spilling it, a small pathetic victory. He takes the glass from you, his fingers brushing yours. The touch is brief, but it sends a jolt of ice through your veins. He asks you questions. Where are you from? What is your name? You give him the rehearsed answers, your voice small and thin. You are Alice. You're from a small village in Kent. You speak in monosyllables, your mind a complete blank. You're acutely aware of the corset digging into your ribs, the smoky air stinging your eyes, the weight of his gaze. This is the ritual, the pretense of courtship, compressed into 10 excruciating minutes. He is judging your looks, your voice, your demeanour. You're trying desperately to remember Flora's advice, laugh at his jokes, look interested, project an aura of willing pleasure. It is the hardest, deliberate subversive act of rebellion against the demure natural ideal of the angel in the house. As you stare at the painted stranger in the mirror, it doesn't feel like rebellion. It feels like a mask you are being forced to wear, one that might just fuse to your skin if you wear it for too long. Mrs. Gray comes to inspect you. She walks around you once, her critical eye missing nothing. She tugs at your neckline, pulling it a fraction of an inch lower. "Smile," she commands. You force your lips into an unnatural shape. It feels more like a grimace. "Better," she says, though her tone is flat. Remember, men don't pay for miserable cows. They can get that at home for free. It's a crude, effective piece of business advice. One of the first light jokes you'll encounter in this dark new world. You're now dressed, painted and packaged. The cost of the dress, the undergarments, the rouge, the very air you breathe, it's all being noted down in Mrs. Gray's ledger, a debt you will have to work long and hard to repay. You're a walking, talking investment, and tonight she expects to see a return. Now that you look the part, you must learn to act it. Your first evening is a trial by fire, a frantic whispered crash course in the brothel's intricate and unwritten constitution. Kate and another woman, a sharp-faced redhead named Flora, become your reluctant instructors. They don't do it out of the goodness of their hearts, but out of self-preservation. A new girl who makes a mistake can bring trouble on the entire house. Your ignorance is a liability they can't afford. The first lesson is on the language of the house. You must learn a new vocabulary, a kind of coded speech. Clients are never called clients or customers in their hearing. They are gentlemen or visitors. The act itself is referred to by a dozen different euphemisms, from the clinical, the business, to the arch seeing a gentleman upstairs. Money is never discussed so crassly. Instead, there are gifts, or tokens of appreciation. This verbal dance is crucial. It maintains the flimsy illusion that this is a house of leisure and pleasure, not a straightforward commercial enterprise. It's a courtesy to the clients, allowing them to pretend they are not merely paying for a service, but are being entertained by charming, if accommodating, young women. It's a lie, of course, but a profitable one. The second, more terrifying lesson is about the money itself. You will never, ever handle the cash. When a gentleman chooses you, he pays Mrs. Gray directly before you even leave the parlour. The governess will tell him the price of a bottle of champagne, or a contribution for the music, a fee that covers her cut and the use of the room. Any additional gift the man might give you upstairs is theoretically yours to keep. but Kate warns you with a cynical roll of her eyes. The governess has ways of knowing, she says. Best to declare it. She'll take her share, but she won't fine you for hiding it. And then there are the fines. The system of fines is the bedrock of Mrs. Gray's control. You sit in the attic as Kate and Flora list them off, a dizzying litany of potential infractions. A spot on your... you're a small thing, Mrs. Gray mutters, pulling out a dress of electric blue satin. This might do. She holds it up against you. It's garish, a colour you would never have chosen, a colour designed to be seen. You are handed the dress, along with a set of undergarments. This is where the true physical torment begins. The chemise is standard enough, but then comes the corset. It's not the gently supporting garment of a respectable woman. This is a tool of the trade, a piece of industrial strength architecture for the female form. It's stiffened with whalebone or steel, and its purpose is to create the exaggerated hourglass figure that is fashionable. It will hoist your bosom up to an almost comical degree, shrink your waist to an unnatural smallness, and press on your ribs until it's hard to take a full breath. Polly is tasked with lacing you in. She tells you to hold onto the bedpost and pulls the laces taut, her foot braced against your lower back for leverage. The pressure is immense. Your internal organs feel like they're being rearranged. Breathing becomes a short, shallow affair. You get used to it, Polly says, seeing the look on your face. You sincerely doubt it. The corset was a ubiquitous item of clothing for Victorian women of all classes, a mainstream fact of life. But for you, its purpose is different. It's not just about fashion, it's about packaging. It moulds your body into a commercially desirable shape, a living advertisement for the pleasures on offer. You feel armoured and incredibly vulnerable at the same time. The rigid shell creates a barrier between you and the world, yet it also makes you more fragile, more dependent on others to even bend over or sit down comfortably. It's a very literal gilded cage, constricting your every move. Over the corset goes a cage crinoline, a bell-shaped frame made of steel hoops that will hold the skirt of your dress out. Then come the layers of petticoats, and finally the blue sateen gown itself. It feels heavy, cumbersome, and ridiculous. You look at your reflection in the small clouded mirror in the attic. The person staring back is a stranger, a brightly coloured doll with your face. Her cheeks are flushed from the pressure of the corset, and her eyes are wide with a mixture of fear and disbelief. Then comes the hair and makeup. Kate shows you the ropes. There are no fancy cosmetics here. A pot of rouge, little more than tinted grease, is used to redden your cheeks and lips. Rice powder is dusted over your face to give it a pale, porcelain look, though it does little to hide your freckles. To make your eyes look larger and more dramatic, the end of a matchstick is burnt, cooled, and then used as a crude eyeliner to trace a dark, sooty line around your lids. It's a strange fringe tidbit of the era, this toilette of the working woman, a far cry from the subtle, natural look prized by the upper classes. It's not about beauty, it's about visibility in a dimly lit room. Your hair is twisted up with a few curls allowed to fall artfully around your face. The final touch is a dab of cheap, overpowering perfume behind your ears and on your wrists. It's the same scent you smelled when you first entered the house, the signature fragrance of Mrs. Gray's establishment. It's the smell of the trade. Historians still argue about whether the exaggerated, painted look of the prostitute was a mark of shame forced upon her, or a dress, a fine, a chipped glass, a fine. Arguing with another girl in front of a gentleman, a heavy fine. Looking sullen or bored, a fine. Refusing a gentleman that Mrs. Gray has approved, unthinkable. That would mean instant dismissal, with the debt you've already accrued, for your new clothes, for your food, called in. You would be thrown out with nothing but the dress on your back which you would technically owe her for. It's a perfect system of debt peonage, ensuring a compliant and terrified workforce. This economic entrapment was a mainstream feature of many such houses, making a clean break nearly impossible for most women. The most crucial lesson, however, is the most difficult. It is the art of feigning desire. Flora, the more pragmatic of the two, puts it bluntly. They're not paying for your body, she says, tapping her temple. They're paying for this, for the fantasy. You must learn to laugh at jokes that aren't funny. You must listen with rapt attention to boring stories about their work or their wives. You must learn to mirror their moods, to be lively and flirtatious for the boisterous ones, quiet and sympathetic for the melancholy ones. You must become a convincing actress, and the role you are playing is the woman who wants you. It's a performance of emotional labour so intense it feels physically draining. You have to dissociate, to push your own feelings, your fear, your disgust, your exhaustion, down into a small locked box inside your mind. You practice in the mirror, trying to make your smile reach your eyes. It doesn't. You look like a frightened doll. This need to perform, to manage a client's ego, is something that historians still argue about. Was it a calculated survival skill, a form of professional competence, or was it the most profoundly damaging aspect of the work, forcing women to alienate themselves from their own emotions? For you, in this moment, it just feels like one more impossible task. As the first gentlemen begin to arrive downstairs, you can hear the murmur of their voices and Mrs. Gray's welcoming laughter. Your stomach clenches. Kate gives you a nudge. Pinch your cheeks, she advises. Gives you a bit of colour, makes you look eager. You pinch them, hard. It stings. You're also taught the silent signals. If a man becomes too rough or difficult upstairs, there is a specific way to pull the bell cord. 3 short tugs, not the single long one used to summon Polly for drinks. This will bring Mrs. Gray or a hired male minder to the door. It's a safety measure, but one to be used only in the direst of emergencies. Calling for help without what the governess deems a good enough reason will earn you, you guessed it, a fine. You're being trained to manage your own risk. A quirky, almost comical part of your education is learning to pour wine. You're not just to slop it in a glass. You must hold the bottle a certain way, wipe the rim, present it to the gentleman. It's part of the show of being a lady of leisure. Your first attempt with a bottle of water in the attic is a clumsy disaster, earning a snort from Flora. Try not to baptise the paying customers, she quips. It's the second light joke you've heard, and it's just as grim as the first. The bell rings, summoning the women downstairs. It's time. Your lessons are over. You take a deep, shallow breath, all your corset will allow, and follow the other women out of the attic. You descend the stairs into the warm, smoky, perfumed air of the parlour. Your education is about to become an examination, and the penalty for failure is terrifyingly real. You're no longer the girl who stitches shirts or dreams of the countryside. You are Alice, and you have your lines to learn and your part to play. Descending the stairs into the parlour feels like stepping onto a stage moments before the curtain rises. The other women, 4 of them besides you, move with a practised ease you can only envy. There's Kate, your reluctant mentor. Flora, the sharp-faced redhead. A quiet, dark-haired girl named Ellen who seems to retreat into herself. And a boisterous, older woman named Bess, who has a loud, infectious laugh that doesn't quite reach her eyes. You are the new addition to this strange, involuntary family, and your arrival has subtly shifted the delicate ecosystem of the house. The relationships between the women in a Victorian brothel were a complex tapestry of codependence, rivalry, and fleeting moments of genuine connection. You're all in the same leaky boat, and that shared predicament fosters a certain bond. In the quiet hours of the afternoon, mending torn lace or sharing a pipe of cheap tobacco, a fragile camaraderie can bloom. You learn about each other in fragments. You learn that Kate sends a portion of her meagre earnings to her mother in Ireland, that Flora dreams of saving enough to emigrate to America, and that Bess was once a gentleman's mistress before he tired of her and cast her off. These stories are shared in hushed tones in the attic, a world away from the forced gaiety of the parlour below. This is your sisterhood in shared misery. They teach you the small tricks of survival, how to use a bit of lemon juice and sugar to soothe a throat made raw by cheap gin and forced laughter, how to position yourself in the parlour to catch the most flattering light from the gas lamps, how to quickly stitch a ripped seam so the governess won't notice. There's a shared language of weary glances and subtle nods, a silent communication that flows beneath the notice of the men you entertain. When a particularly unpleasant or drunk client enters, a look will pass between the women, a warning, a flicker of sympathy for whoever he chooses. But for every moment of solidarity, there is an undercurrent of bitter rivalry. You are, after all, in competition. Your livelihood, your ability to pay down your debt to Mrs. Gray, and your very survival in the house depend on being chosen by the clients. Youth and novelty are valuable currencies, and your arrival makes you both an object of curiosity and a threat. You are the new girl, which means for a time you will attract more attention. This can breed resentment. Flora in particular watches you with a sharp, calculating gaze. If a regular client of hers shows an interest in you, her friendliness evaporates, replaced by a cold silence or a cutting remark made just loud enough for you to hear. "Look at her," she might mutter to Bess, playing the yourself, and mechanically begin to wash in the basin of cold water. The routine has begun. You are now truly one of them. The shock of that first encounter doesn't have time to settle. It is washed away by the relentless tide of the nightly routine. There is no sick leave in this job, no time off for emotional recovery. The bell rings, the parlour fills up, and you are expected to be back on your settee smiling. Your initiation is over. You are now just part of the machinery. The evenings unfold with a grim, repetitive rhythm. By 6 o'clock you must be washed, dressed and painted, ready for inspection by Mrs. Gray. She scrutinises every detail, from the shine on your cheap shoes to the arrangement of your hair. Any perceived flaw earns a sharp reprimand or a mark in her ledger. This inspection isn't about ensuring you look your best. It's about ensuring her product is consistent and meets market standards. It's a quality control check on a factory floor. By 7, you and the other women are arranged in the parlour. The gaslights are lit, casting a warm, deceptive glow that hides the frayed edges of the furniture and the fatigue in your eyes. Bess takes her place at the pianoforte, her repertoire of cheerful, slightly bawdy songs forming the soundtrack to your evenings. The music is deliberately loud, creating an atmosphere of manufactured gaiety, and more practically, covering up the sounds from the rooms upstairs. It's a strange workplace environment, like an office party that never ever ends. For the first hour or two, you simply wait. This is the part of the job that Victorian social commentators never wrote about. The sheer, crushing boredom of it. You sit, you smile, you make pointless small talk with the other women. You try to look alluring and available, a pose that is exhausting to maintain. You're on display, a collection of living statues waiting to be selected. The front door opens and closes, admitting a slow but steady stream of men. Your head turns, you assess. You offer a hopeful or perhaps a wary smile. Then you wait some more. Mrs. Gray acts as the master of ceremonies, gliding between groups, making introductions, laughing at jokes, and subtly directing traffic. She has a memory like a steel trap for her regular clients' preferences. She knows which man likes a lively conversationalist, which one prefers a quiet, demure type, and which one is looking for a new face. Her judgment is final. Sometimes she will steer a man towards a particular woman, perhaps one who has had a slow week. "Flora, my dear, Mr. Abernathy was just asking after you. Her word is law." Being chosen is a moment of mixed relief and dread. It means you are earning, chipping away at the mountain of debt you owe the governess. But it also means another trip up the stairs, another performance, another piece of yourself hollowed out. The men who choose you rarely see you as an individual. You are a type, a category. Tonight, you might be the innocent country mouse. The men fall for that every time. The competition isn't just for the most generous clients, but also for the least offensive ones. The quiet, quick, sober men are prizes. The loud, drunken, aggressive ones are to be avoided if possible. Being chosen by the former and passed over for the latter is a small victory in a war of attrition. Historians still argue about the extent of this internal conflict. Were these houses hotbeds of jealousy and betrayal, as sensationalist Victorian accounts often depicted them? Or was the sisterhood of prostitutes a more powerful, supportive force than society gave them credit for? The reality, you discover, is that it's both, often at the same time. You can share a heartfelt secret with Kate in the afternoon, and be locked in a silent, tense battle with her for a client's attention that very evening. The hierarchy is subtle but rigid. It's based on seniority, on who has the favour of the governess, and most importantly on who is the most profitable. Bess, as the oldest, has a certain authority, but her age is also a liability. Kate is the current star, consistently earning the most. You, as the newcomer, are at the very bottom, an unknown quantity. You must navigate this treacherous social landscape carefully. Saying the wrong thing, appearing too arrogant, or complaining too much can isolate you, and in this house, isolation is dangerous. A fascinating fringe aspect of this life is the creation of flash slang, a secret language used by those on the margins of society. You start to pick it up. A dollymop is an amateur or part-time prostitute, a term used with contempt by full-time professionals like yourselves. A punter is a client. To be in lumber means to be in trouble or in jail. This shared vocabulary, much of which is now lost to history, was another way of building a collective identity, of drawing a line between us and the respectable world that judged and used you. You witness your first real conflict a few nights in. Ellen, the quiet girl, has a favourite client, a shy young clerk who visits regularly and treats her with a semblance of kindness. One night he arrives, and Bess, feeling the pressure of a slow week, makes a deliberate play for him, using her bawdy humour to draw his attention. He's flattered and flustered, and ultimately chooses Bess. The look on Ellen's face is one of quiet devastation. Later, in the attic, you hear muffled sobs coming from her bed. No one says anything. There are no words of comfort to offer because everyone understands. Bess did what she had to do to earn her keep. It's the law of the jungle, just played out in cheap satin and bad lighting. It's a strange dynamic. These women are your colleagues, your roommates, your competition, and the only people in the entire world who understand your life. They can be your fiercest allies and your most bitter rivals. One moment, Kate is adjusting the back of your dress and whispering a piece of advice. The next, she's steering a wealthy-looking client away from you with a dazzling smile. It's a dizzying, emotionally exhausting dance. You learn to be wary, to hold a piece of yourself back. Trust is a luxury you can't afford, but total isolation is a death sentence. You must find your place in this small, damaged sorority, somewhere between camaraderie and caution. Acting job of your life. He makes a small, unfunny comment about the weather, and you produce a high, unnatural laugh that sounds like a startled bird. It seems to satisfy him. He turns to Mrs. Gray and murmurs something to her. She smiles, a tight, professional expression of success. A transaction has just occurred, somewhere beyond your hearing. Your fate for the next hour has been sealed. The governess turns to you. Alice, show Mr. Howard up to the blue room. The world seems to slow down. The piano music, the chatter, it all fades into a dull roar. This is it. You stand up, your legs feeling unsteady. You lead the way up the main staircase, acutely aware of his footsteps behind you. You don't look back. The blue room is one of several small chambers on the second floor, each decorated in a different colour scheme. It's small, dominated by a large bed with a blue satin coverlet. There is a washstand with a pitcher and basin, and a single gas lamp turned down low, casting flickering shadows on the walls. The door closes behind you, and the click of the latch is the loudest sound you have ever heard. The room feels airless, suffocating. The man, Mr. Howard, removes his jacket and methodically loosens his collar. He's no longer the polite gentleman from the parlour. His face is impassive, his eyes holding a look of detached purpose. There is no conversation here, no more pretense. The experience itself is a blur of confusion, discomfort, and profound detachment. You do as you're told, your body moving while your mind retreats to a distant, safe place. You float up to the grimy ceiling and watch the scene unfold below, as if it were happening to someone else. You think of meaningless things, the pattern on the wallpaper, the way the gaslight hisses, the list of kings and queens you learned in school. Anything to disconnect from the physical reality of what is happening. This mental escape is a crucial survival mechanism, a way to endure the unendurable. Historians call it dissociation, a common response to trauma. For you, it's the only thing that keeps you from shattering into a million pieces. He is not cruel, not violent. He is simply using you. You're an object, a vessel for his needs. There is no pleasure in it for you, only a grim, dutiful compliance. It is a world away from the fumbling, affectionate explorations you might have once dreamed of. This is commerce. It is work, a tedious, humiliating, and soul-crushing form of labour. When it is over, he is quick to dress. He doesn't look at you. He's once again the respectable clerk, adjusting his tie, ready to melt back into the London night. He leaves a shilling on the bedside table, a gift, a pitifully small sum for what you have just endured. He opens the door and is gone without another word. You lie still for a long time after the door is closed, staring at the water stains on the ceiling. Your body feels like a foreign country. You feel used, soiled, and utterly, devastatingly alone. This was your first client, the first of what will be countless anonymous men. The first time is a threshold. You have crossed it, and you know, with a certainty that settles like a stone in your gut, that you can never go back. You finally push yourself up, wrap a thin dressing gown around. Realised, their money gives them a sense of ownership over you that is more profound and chilling than that of the other men. Finally, there are the ones you learn to dread, the vicious men. They are not a type in the same way. The cruelty can hide behind any face, rich or poor. But you learn to spot the warning signs, a certain coldness in the eyes, a grip on your arm that is just a little too tight, a sneer that plays on their lips when they think no one is watching. They are the men who enjoy the power imbalance. They are not paying for pleasure, but for the opportunity to dominate and degrade. The performance with them is one of utter submission and terror-filled caution. You become pliant, agreeable, trying to give them no reason to unleash the violence simmering beneath the surface. Every encounter with one of these men leaves you shaken for days. A quirky historical tidbit. Some men had incredibly specific, and to you, bizarre fetishes. There was a known market for governess fantasies, where men wished to be disciplined, or for scenarios involving elaborate medical examinations. Mrs. Gray, being a shrewd businesswoman, would sometimes cater to these special tastes, for a significantly higher price, of course. Being asked to participate in one of these is both confusing and deeply unsettling. Historians still debate the emotional toll this constant categorization took on the women. Did it empower them, giving them a framework to manage their work, or did it further dehumanize both them and their clients, reducing all human interaction to a set of predictable, cynical scripts? Standing in the parlour watching a new man enter, you don't have time for such analysis. You simply see a collection of needs, appetites, and potential dangers walking through the door. You quickly flip through your mental catalogue, select the appropriate mask, and paste on the corresponding smile. He is not a person. He is a job, a youth, a soldier, a sad man, a gentleman. You're not a person either. You are his fantasy, for as long as he is paid for the privilege. The promise of earning money, of finding some semblance of financial independence, was the desperate hope that led you to Mrs. Gray's door. But you quickly discover that the financial reality of this life is a cleverly designed trap. You're not an employee earning a wage, you're an independent contractor drowning in debt, and your only creditor is also your landlord, your employer, and your jailer. The heart of this system is the governess's ledger. It's a thick leather-bound book that she keeps locked in her office, a sacred text that governs every aspect of your life. In this book, next to your new name, Alice, she records every transaction. On one side of the page are your earnings. For every client you see, a portion of the fee he paid downstairs is credited to you, girl. Tomorrow, you might be asked to play the part of a worldly French coquette, affecting a terrible accent for a man's clumsy fantasy. The process of being chosen is itself a small humiliation. Men will often walk around the room, openly appraising the merchandise. They will look you up and down, sometimes asking Mrs. Gray about you as if you weren't even there. The new one, does she speak much? One might ask. It's a constant reminder that you are not a participant in this transaction. You are the object of it. A mainstream fact of the time is that some guidebooks, like the notorious Swell's Night Guide, were published, listing brothels, their specialties, and sometimes even the names and attributes of the women within, like a catalogue. You pray you never end up in one of those. After you've been with a client, you return downstairs. Sometimes the man leaves immediately. Other times, he might stay for another drink, and you are expected to sit with him to continue the performance until he departs. Then, you smooth your dress, check your makeup in a small pocket mirror, and rejoin the lineup, ready for the next one. On a busy night, a Saturday perhaps, when the city's clerks and soldiers have their weekly pay in their pockets, you might see 3 or 4 men before the night is over. On a slow Tuesday, you might not be chosen at all, which brings its own kind of anxiety. A slow night means no earnings, but the cost of your board and lodging is still being added to your tab. The hours blur together. The faces of the men become a meaningless parade. The conversations repeat. The feigned laughter begins to feel like a physical tick. You measure the evening in stages, the initial rush after dinner, the lull around 10 o'clock, and then the late-night surge of men, usually drunker and more demanding, who have been turned out of the pubs at closing time. Historians still argue about the typical number of clients a woman would see per night. Accounts vary wildly, from a few to a dozen or more, depending on the class of the brothel and the demand. In a house like Mrs. Gray's, 3 or 4 seems to be the exhausting average. By 2 in the morning, the last of the gentlemen have gone. The piano falls silent. The gaslights are turned down. The charade is over. The sudden quiet is almost as jarring as the earlier noise. You and the other women, your vibrant costumes now looking cheap and pathetic in the dim light, trudge wearily up the stairs to the attic. The transformation is stark. The smiles are gone. The flirtatious energy vanished, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion. You peel off the constricting corset, a moment of pure physical bliss, and wipe the greasy paint from your face. The performance is over. The long, repetitive, soul-wearing performance of another night's work. You fall into your lumpy bed, your mind a dull hum of fatigue, knowing that in less than 16 hours you will have to do it all over again. After a few weeks, the endless stream of men's faces starts to resolve into recognisable types. You become a reluctant anthropologist, developing a mental filing system for the parade of the split is supposedly 50-50, a common arrangement in such houses. So if a man pays £1 for his time with you, 10 shillings are entered in your column. But it's the other side of the page, the debt column, that is the true masterpiece of financial entrapment. The list of your expenses is endless, and it begins the moment you walk through the door. The gaudy blue dress you were issued. That wasn't a uniform, it was a purchase. Its inflated cost, perhaps £2, more than a month's wages for a factory worker, was the first entry on your tab. The corset, the petticoats, the cheap shoes, the pot of rouge, all itemised, all charged to you at a significant markup. And the charges don't stop there. You're billed weekly for board and lodging. This covers your spot in the crowded attic and your meagre meals of watery stew and bread. The cost is exorbitant, far more than a similar room would cost elsewhere, but you have no choice but to pay it. Then there's laundry. Your sheets and, more importantly, your work clothes must be washed. This service, performed by Polly in a steaming lye-scented basement, comes with another weekly fee. There are also the mandatory purchases. You're expected to drink with the clients, but you're not given the drinks for free. Every glass of gin, sherry or flat champagne that you're obliged to accept from a gentleman is added to your bill. Mrs. Gray is effectively making you buy her own overpriced liquor. This was a mainstream practice, one of the most insidious ways madames ensured their workers' profits flowed right back into the house's coffers. It creates a perverse incentive. The more you entertain, the more you owe. And then there are the fines, the governess's favourite tool of discipline and profit. The list is long and arbitrary. A torn stocking, 5 shillings. A wine stain on the settee, 10 shillings. Caught sleeping in past the designated hour, a fine. An argument with Flora that a client overhears, a fine for both of you. Looking melancholy? That's one of the worst, a subjective crime that can cost you a day's earnings. These fines are levied without appeal and added directly to your debt. At the end of your first week, Mrs. Gray calls you into her office for a settling up. This is the moment the jaws of the trap snap shut. She opens the ledger and with her pen she tallies it all up. Your earnings on one side, a hopeful-looking figure, and then the deductions on the other, the cost of your clothes, your board, your laundry, the 4 glasses of gin you drank with clients, and a small fine for being slow to respond to the bell on your second night. She subtracts the total debt from your total earnings. The result is devastating. Not only have you not made any money, but you're actually deeper in debt to her than you were when you started. You've worked all week, endured the humiliation and the exhaustion, and all you've done is pay for the privilege of being there. You're left with perhaps a few shillings of pocket money, enough to buy a ribbon or a small personal item, but not nearly enough to save, not nearly enough to dream of escape. This state of perpetual debt is the point of the system. As long as you owe Mrs. Gray money, you cannot leave. If you were to try, she could, in theory, report you to the police for the theft of the clothes on your back. It's a threat she never has to make explicitly. The fear of it hangs in the air. You're bound to her not by chains, but by arithmetic. A quirky and grim aspect of this economy was the pawning of clothes. On a desperately slow week, a woman might get permission from the madame to pawn an item of her working wardrobe for a small amount of cash. with the full understanding that she would have to earn enough to buy it back out of pawn before it was needed again. It was a high-stakes gamble against future earnings. Historians still argue about the typicality of this extreme exploitation. While some women, particularly elite courtesans, did achieve financial independence, for the vast majority in houses like this, the system was designed for failure. It kept a steady, compliant and desperate workforce in place. The madame's risk was low, and her profits were guaranteed. You leave her office in a daze, clutching the few coins she's given you. The vibrant, bustling London outside the brothel's drawn curtains feels a million miles away. You had imagined sending a little money home to your family, a small sign that you were making your way in the city. Now you see the bitter irony. You fled poverty only to land in a more complex and inescapable form of it. You're working harder than ever, sacrificing more than you ever thought possible, and yet you are sinking deeper and deeper into a financial quagmire. The hope of escape feels more distant than ever. Mrs. Gray's ledger is more effective than any locked door at keeping you right where she wants you. Of all the fears that haunt the gaslit corridors of the house, the fear of violence, the fear of debt, the fear of the future, none is as constant and corrosive as the spectre of sickness. In an era before antibiotics, in a profession built on physical intimacy with a rotating cast of strangers, disease is not a risk, it is a statistical certainty. Every cough in the night, every strange rash, every unexplained ache sends a ripple of panic through the attic. The primary terror, the one spoken of in hushed, fearful tones, is the bad disease, or the French pox, syphilis. You've all heard the stories, seen the evidence on the streets. You know how it starts, but you also know how it ends, in madness, paralysis, disfigurement, and a slow, agonizing death. There is no cure. The treatments available are almost as terrifying as the disease itself. The mainstream medical remedy was mercury, a potent neurotoxin. Patients were poisoned with mercury rubs, mercury pills, even mercury vapor baths, in the hope of killing the sickness. The side effects were horrific: tremors, tooth loss, neurological damage, and a slow poisoning that often just hastened the patient's demise. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen from our ancient Egypt episode? This is the Victorian equivalent of a terrible medical idea. They need to be seen to be doing something, and the easiest targets are always the women and the brothel keepers. A raid, when it comes, is a terrifying spectacle of organised chaos. It usually happens late at night, without warning. A sharp, heavy banging on the front door, not the polite tap of a client, followed by the splintering of wood as the door is forced. Uniformed officers pour into the house, their heavy boots thundering on the stairs. The atmosphere of forced gaiety in the parlour evaporates into sheer panic. In that moment, a stark and brutal hypocrisy is laid bare. The clients, the respectable gentlemen, the merchants, the clerks, are almost always allowed to slip away. An officer might hold them for a moment, take their name and address with a perfunctory air, and then show them to the back door with a nod and a wink. Best be on your way, sir. They are customers, taxpayers, voters. They are part of the power structure. Arresting them would cause a scandal, create paperwork, and inconvenience important people. It's simply not done. But you and the other women, and Mrs. Gray, are the true targets. You're herded together, your flimsy satin gowns and painted faces looking garish and pathetic under the harsh glare of the officers' lanterns. You are the evidence. You are the symbols of vice that must be publicly disciplined. You are rounded up, sometimes still in your working attire, and marched out of the house into the cold night air, often to the jeers of a crowd of neighbours who have gathered to watch the spectacle. You're taken to the local police station and held in a crowded, filthy, lice-infested cell for the night with drunkards, thieves and other fallen women swept up in the same net. The next morning, you are brought before a magistrate. Mrs. Gray, as the keeper of a disorderly house, will face the most serious charge. She will likely be given a heavy fine, which she will pay, adding the cost to the collective debt of her workers. You and the other women will be charged with vagrancy or soliciting. The magistrate, a grim-faced man who has likely visited a house just like yours, will deliver a stern lecture on morality. He will sentence you to a small fine or, if he's in a particularly punitive mood, a few days of hard labour in a place like the dreaded Holloway prison. You stand in the dock, humiliated and powerless, a pawn in a much larger game of social control. A quirky tidbit from the time is the existence of dress lodgers. These were women who didn't live in the brothel but rented their fancy clothes from the madame each night. If caught in a raid, they could sometimes claim they were just visiting, and their clothes were a costume for a party, a flimsy but occasionally successful defence. Historians still argue about the true purpose of these laws and raids. Were they a genuine, if misguided, attempt to curb prostitution, or were they simply a form of social theatre designed to reassure the public that morality was being upheld, while allowing the profitable business to continue with minimal disruption? From your place in the cold, smelly holding cell, it's certainly, when a woman does fall ill, she faces a terrible choice. To admit sickness to Mrs. Gray is to be declared unfit for work. If it's a minor ailment, she might be allowed to rest in the attic for a day or two, but the cost of her board will continue to accumulate, plunging her deeper into debt. If the illness is serious, or suspected to be venereal, she will be cast out. The governess cannot afford to have a sick woman in her house. She can't risk her other investments or the reputation of her establishment. And so you learn to hide it. You learn to suppress your coughs, to cover a rash with powder, to work through a fever, to smile for a client when your whole body aches. You become an expert in masking your own suffering. You see Kate working one night with cheeks flushed with fever, her eyes overly bright. She dismisses it as a chill, but you all know she's terrified. To be sick is to be unprofitable. To be unprofitable is to be disposable. The ultimate destination for a woman cast out for illness is the workhouse infirmary or the lock hospital, places of last resort, where the destitute and the dying are swept away from public view. It is a fate more terrifying than any other, a slow, anonymous death sentence. Every morning you wake up and take a silent inventory of your own body, praying that today at least you are still healthy enough to work. You learn very quickly that the law is not your friend. It is a shadowy, unpredictable force that exists not to protect you, but to manage you. In the intricate ecosystem of Victorian London, you and your profession occupy a space of tolerated illegality. The act of selling your body is not, strictly speaking, a crime. However, the acts surrounding it, soliciting on the street, keeping a disorderly house, public drunkenness, are all offences that can land you in front of a magistrate. This legal grey area creates a system ripe for hypocrisy and corruption. Your primary interaction with the law comes in the form of the local police constable, the copper, or Bobby, on the beat. Mrs. Gray has an understanding with the officers who patrol her street. This is a delicate, unspoken arrangement lubricated by regular, discreet payments. A few shillings pressed into a palm, a bottle of brandy left on the doorstep at Christmas. These are the premiums paid on an insurance policy against official interference. It's a mainstream fact that such low-level corruption was endemic in many parts of London. The police were underpaid, and the opportunity for a little extra income was often too tempting to resist. This arrangement means that, for the most part, the house is left alone. The Bobby on the beat will walk past the respectable-looking brick facade and see nothing, hear nothing. He is paid to be selectively blind and deaf. But this piece is fragile. It can be shattered at any moment by a change in personnel, a new zealous sergeant at the local station, or, more likely, by a wave of public moral outrage. From time to time, a crusading journalist or a fiery preacher will whip up a frenzy about the great social evil. Newspapers will run sensationalist stories, and moral reform societies will petition the authorities to clean up the streets. When this happens, the police are forced to act. The fear is amplified by the law. The Contagious Diseases Acts, first passed in the 1860s and a major point of public debate, are a constant threat. In designated garrison towns and ports, any woman merely suspected of being a prostitute could be arrested by a special plainclothes policeman, taken to a designated lock hospital, and forced to undergo a brutal and humiliating internal examination with a cold, unforgiving speculum. If found to be diseased, she could be involuntarily confined to the hospital for weeks or months until she was deemed clean and released, only for the cycle to likely begin again. While London wasn't officially under the Acts for most of their duration, the principle and the fear were pervasive. Mrs. Gray lives in terror of an outbreak that would bring the authorities to her door. Her vigilance is not for your health, but for her businesses. This leads to a culture of obsessive, if misguided, hygiene. A jug and basin stand in every bedroom, and you are expected to wash meticulously after every single client. Mrs. Gray provides carbolic soap, its sharp, medicinal scent a constant reminder of the invisible threat. But this is a pitifully inadequate defence against microscopic enemies you can't even imagine. When prevention fails, you turn to the world of folk remedies and back-alley quacks. You learn about dubious concoctions from the other women. Potions of potassium iodide, herbal douches with astringent properties, ointments of unknown but probably toxic composition, all are traded and whispered about. A particularly strange fringe belief held that drinking large quantities of sarsaparilla could purify the blood and ward off infection. You see women spend their meagre pocket money on these useless talismans, clinging to any shred of hope, however flimsy. It's a desperate grasping for control in a situation where you have almost none. Beyond the terror of venereal disease, the conditions of your life make you vulnerable to a host of other illnesses. The house is poorly ventilated, and the damp chill of the London winter seeps into the attic where you all sleep crammed together. Colds and influenza spread like wildfire. A simple cough is a source of constant anxiety. Is it just a cold, or is it the beginning of consumption, tuberculosis, the great scourge of the 19th century that thrived in overcrowded, unsanitary urban environments? You see the telltale signs in others: the persistent hacking cough, the feverish, rosy cheeks, the terrifying flecks of blood on a handkerchief. Your diet is poor, lacking in the fresh fruits and vegetables that could bolster your immune system. Your reliance on gin and laudanum to numb the physical and emotional pain further weakens your body. Your sleep is insufficient and of poor quality. You're a textbook case of a compromised host, a perfect environment for any passing pathogen to take root. Historians still argue about the true prevalence rates of STIs in this population. Some contemporary moralists claim nearly every prostitute was infected, while other evidence suggests women develop sophisticated, if not always effective, risk management strategies. The truth is likely somewhere in the middle, but from your perspective, the risk feels absolute. Anonymous figures who pass through the parlour. This categorisation is another survival tool. It helps you anticipate, to prepare, to know which mask to wear. Each man is a puzzle to be quickly solved, and a mistake in your assessment can lead to a difficult encounter or, worse, a complaint to Mrs. Gray. First, there are the youths. These are often students from the university or clerks on their first taste of independence, usually arriving in nervous, giggling groups. They are flush with a tiny bit of cash and a great deal of bravado that barely conceals their terror. They try to act worldly, ordering drinks with a swagger and making loud jokes, but their eyes are wide and uncertain. With them, the performance is one of gentle, maternal guidance. You have to be the one in control to lead them through the transaction with a kind of practised patience, as if teaching a boy to dance. They are often quick and clumsy, more interested in the bragging rights than the experience itself. They are generally harmless, but their nervous energy can be exhausting. Then come the soldiers and sailors. On any given night, a third of the British Army might be stationed in or around London, a massive captive market of young men. They arrive on a Saturday night with their pay burning a hole in their pockets, looking for a release from the brutal discipline of barracks life. They are loud, often drunk, and travel in packs. They want bawdy songs, cheap gin, and no pretence. The parlour becomes a raucous, chaotic place when they are in. The performance required is one of boisterous, good-natured fun. You have to match their energy, laugh at their crude jokes, and endure the occasional clumsy grope with a practised shrug. They run out of money quickly and can sometimes turn surly when it's gone. But Mrs. Gray and her hired minder are adept at ushering them out before real trouble starts. In stark contrast to the sad, lonely men. These are the ones who make you feel a flicker of something resembling pity, which is a dangerous emotion in this house. They are often middle-aged, married men, clerks, shopkeepers, men trapped in quiet lives of desperation. They don't want the boisterous party. They want to talk. They will sit with you in a corner of the parlour, nursing a single drink for an hour, telling you about their disappointing jobs, their cold wives, their unrealised dreams. You become a paid confessor. The performance here is one of sympathetic listening. You nod, you murmur, "Oh, how terrible." You offer meaningless platitudes. They are paying for an illusion of intimacy, for a woman who seems to care. Upstairs, they are often hesitant, almost apologetic. These encounters are less physically threatening, but more emotionally draining. They leave you feeling hollow and complicit in their quiet sadness. Of course, there are the grand gentlemen. These are the wealthier clients, merchants, financiers, sometimes even aristocrats slumming it for a night. They arrive in handsome cabs, dressed in fine wool coats and smelling of expensive cologne. They are used to getting what they want, and they expect a higher level of service. For them, the illusion of the high-class courtesan must be maintained. You must be witty, well-spoken, or at least quiet and graceful, and attentive. They are the ones who might request a specific costume or a particular fantasy to be played out. They pay well, and being chosen by one is a mark of status within the house. But they can also be demanding, imperious, and quick to anger if the fantasy is not perfectly. Feels like the latter. The system isn't designed to stop the trade, it's designed to punish the most vulnerable people within it. After paying your fine or serving your few days, you return to the house. The front door has been repaired, the parlour has been tidied. Mrs. Gray is angry but pragmatic. The business must continue. The cost of the raid, her fine, the lost income, will be borne by all of you in the form of new debts and increased pressure to earn. The law has flexed its muscle, demonstrated its power, and then retreated, leaving you more trapped, more indebted, and more cynical than ever before. You have been reminded in the bluntest way possible of your place in the world, a convenient scapegoat for society's sins. Life inside the brothel is a relentless performance, a long series of transactions punctuated by moments of acute anxiety. The pressure is constant, the emotional labour immense. Yet, even in this tightly controlled and exhausting environment, you find small stolen moments of quiet humanity. These are the gaps in the official schedule, the brief interludes between the departure of one client and the arrival of the next, the quiet hours of the afternoon before the evening's work begins. These moments are your oxygen. They are what keep you from completely disappearing into your role as Alice. The afternoons are often the calmest. The morning is for sleeping, a heavy, dreamless slumber of pure exhaustion. You wake around noon to a grey light filtering through the single attic window. The first hour is slow, filled with the groans and rustles of the other women waking up. Polly brings up a meagre breakfast of stale bread and weak sugary tea. You eat sitting on the edge of your bed, the silence of the house broken only by the distant sounds of London stirring outside. After you eat, there are chores. You're responsible for the upkeep of your own working clothes. The cheap sateen and coarse lace are fragile and easily torn. You will spend an hour or more with a needle and thread, carefully mending a ripped seam in your blue dress or reattaching a loose glass bead. The act of sewing is familiar, grounding. It connects you to your past, to the girl who sat by the fire stitching her family's clothes. Your fingers, which once stitched shirts in a sweatshop for a pittance, now labour to maintain the very costume of your entrapment. There's a bitter irony in that, but the focused, repetitive motion is almost meditative. As you sew, you talk. The conversations in the attic are different from the forced flirty banter of the parlour. Here, you can let the mask slip. You talk about home, sharing hazy, idealised memories of green fields or seaside towns. You complain in low, bitter tones about Mrs. Gray's latest fine or a particularly unpleasant client from the night before. Kate might read aloud from A Penny Dreadful, a sensationalist novel filled with tales of dashing highwaymen and swooning heroines. The stories are ludicrous, a world away from your reality, but for a little while you can lose yourselves in them. It's a form of escape, a cheap and accessible kind of magic. Sometimes a small luxury makes its way into the house. Bess might have a good week and splurge on a small pot of jam which you all share, spreading a thin scraping on your bread. It's a taste of sweetness in a life that is mostly sour. These small acts of sharing forge a bond that the rivalry of the parlour can't completely erase. You're all marooned on the same island, and you learn to rely on each other for the small kindnesses that make life bearable. One of the most treasured rituals is the brewing of gin-laced tea. Gin is the unofficial fuel of the house, the cheap, fiery spirit known as Mother's Ruin. Mrs. Gray uses it to keep the clients happy and the women compliant. But in the quiet of the afternoon, a shared cup of tea with a surreptitious splash of gin is not for a client's benefit. It's for yours. It takes the edge off the ever-present anxiety, warms the chill in your bones and loosens your tongues. Sitting together, sipping the hot potent brew, you can almost pretend you are just a group of young women sharing gossip, rather than prisoners waiting for their shift to begin. A historical fact is that the consumption of gin in Victorian England, particularly among the urban poor and marginalised women, was astronomical. It was cheap, readily available, and a powerful anaesthetic for the pains of a brutal existence. A quirky and rather sad fringe activity was the reading of tea leaves. Bess is the expert. After you've finished your cup, she will swirl the dregs and peer into the bottom, predicting fortunes. Her predictions are always vaguely hopeful. "I see a tall, dark stranger," she'll say, her voice taking on a theatrical, mysterious tone. And "a journey over water." It's a game, a silly superstition, but you all listen intently. The idea that the future might hold something other than this endless grinding routine is a fantasy you're all willing to indulge in for a few minutes. Historians still debate the emotional landscape of these women's lives. Were they numbed and brutalised into submission, or did they cultivate a rich inner life and a resilient subculture to survive? The truth you feel lies in these stolen moments. They are proof that you have not been entirely erased. You're not just Alice, the commodity. You're still the girl who misses her mother, who enjoys a good story, who can find a brief warm solace in a shared cup of tea. These interludes are fleeting. The clock on the mantelpiece downstairs will eventually chime 5, a signal that it's time to begin the transformation. The mending is put away, the penny dreadful is hidden under a mattress, and the empty teacups are rinsed. The quiet humanity of the attic must be packed away. You must descend once more into the gaslit parlour and become the painted smiling dolls the gentlemen pay to see. But the memory of that quiet hour, the warmth of the gin, the shared whispers, you carry that with you. It's a tiny, flickering flame of selfhood that you have to guard fiercely, because you know the nightly performance does everything it can to extinguish it. Must accept, of course, and make a great show of enjoying the treat. You learn to hold a cigar, to sip a brandy, to perform a version of sophisticated leisure that you have only ever seen from a distance. A quirky and particularly stressful parlour duty is dancing. If a gentleman is in a lively mood, he might push back the furniture and demand a polka or a waltz. You're expected to oblige. You twirl around the small, cramped space, your crinoline bouncing, your corset digging into your ribs, a fixed smile on your face. You have to be graceful while being steered by a man who is often drunk and clumsy, all while trying not to let him tread on the hem of your expensive, debt-inducing dress. It's a physical and emotional balancing act. Historians still debate the function of this elaborate charade. Was it purely for the benefit of the male ego, a necessary preamble to the commercial transaction? Or did it also serve a purpose for the women, creating a structured, predictable environment that was, in its own way, less chaotic than the terrifying free-for-all of street soliciting? From your perspective, it feels like the most draining part of the night. The time spent upstairs with a client is often a grim, detached procedure, but the hours spent in the parlour, under the constant scrutiny of Mrs. Gray and the clients, require a continuous, high-energy performance. There is no moment to let your guard down. You watch the other women, and you learn. You see how Flora uses flattery, telling a balding, portly man that he has the most fascinating eyes. You see how Kate uses light, teasing humour to keep a man entertained and at arm's length simultaneously. You see how Bess uses her loud, bawdy persona to command the centre of the room. You slowly, painfully begin to assemble your own toolkit of parlour tricks. You discover that a quiet, attentive listening act works best for you. It requires less energy than Flora's effusive flattery, and it seems to appeal to the sad, lonely men who are often less demanding. The parlour is a pressure cooker of false emotion. The air is thick with cheap perfume, cigar smoke, and desperation disguised as merriment. By the end of the night, your face aches from smiling. Your throat is raw from singing and talking over the piano. Your mind is numb from the effort of it all. You have sung and danced and laughed and flattered, all to sell the illusion that this is a house of pleasure. But as you finally climb the stairs to the cold silence of the attic, the only thing you feel is the profound exhaustion of the long, hollow performance. In the quiet, desperate hours in the attic, you and the other women sometimes talk about them. The great women, the queens of the demi-monde. They are the dazzling, almost mythical figures whose names are whispered in the popular press and gossiped about in society drawing rooms. They are the grand courtesans, and their lives seem as distant and fantastical to you as those of royalty. You hear their names, Catherine Walters, known as Skittles, or Cora Pearl, grim reality of your own existence. You hear tales of Skittles, a Liverpool girl who rose to become one of the most famous women in London. They say she had prime ministers and princes as her patrons, that she owned a stable of fine horses and was one of the most skilled and admired equestrians in Hyde Park. She had a fashionable house in Mayfair, wore couture gowns from Paris, and was treated not as a common prostitute, but as a celebrity. Her wit and intelligence were said to be as legendary as her beauty. She was the living embodiment of the pretty horsebreaker phenomenon, a term for these high-flying courtesans who were as famous for their equestrian skills as their romantic conquests. Then there are the stories of Cora Pearl, who conquered Parisian high society. You hear that she had a mansion filled with extravagant treasures, that she once served herself up to her dinner guests on a silver platter, naked and garnished with parsley as the main course. A quirky tidbit you hear whispered is that she owned a string of pearls for every day of the month, and dyed her pet dog blue to match her drawing room curtains. These tales of decadent theatrical excess are so outrageous they feel like fiction. These women represent a fantasy, not just for the men who desired them, but for you as well. Their stories suggest that there is a path out of the muck, a way to transcend the sordid reality of the trade and achieve wealth, power, and even a strange kind of respectability. Flora, who is the most ambitious among you, clings to these stories. It's about finding the right protector, she'll say, her eyes gleaming with a fierce hope. One wealthy man who will set you up in your own apartment, away from all this. It is the ultimate dream, to escape the control of a madam like Mrs. Grey and become an independent operator, a mistress supported in style by a single generous patron. But as the weeks turn into months, you begin to see the vast, unbridgeable gulf that separates your life from theirs. The world of the elite courtesan is a universe away from the mid-tier brothel you inhabit. Those women were exceptionally rare. They were often possessed of not just great beauty, but also intelligence, wit, and a formidable business acumen. They were skilled performers in the salon as well as the bedroom, able to converse on art, politics, and literature. A mainstream historical fact is that many of these women had a level of education and cultural sophistication far beyond that of the average woman of the time, which was part of their appeal to wealthy, powerful men. You, on the other hand, are largely uneducated. You were raised for a life of manual labour, not for witty repartee in a Mayfair salon. Your clients are not prime ministers and dukes. They are clerks and shopkeepers and drunken soldiers. They are not looking for a sparkling conversationalist. They are looking for a cheap, convenient and anonymous release. The idea that one of them would elevate you to a life of luxury is a laughable fantasy. Historians still debate the true nature of the courtesan's life. Was it a glamorous exception that proved the brutal rule, or was it a more attainable goal than we now imagine? Looking around the grim attic, at the tired faces of Kate and Bess and Ellen, you know the answer. The myth of the grand courtesan is just that. A myth. It is a lottery, and the winning tickets are so few as to be statistically meaningless. For every Skittles who triumphed, there were tens of thousands of women like you trapped in debt at the mercy of a madam with no hope of advancement. The myth serves a useful purpose for the system that exploits you. It dangles a glittering, impossible prize, encouraging you to dream of a better future while keeping you compliant in the present. It suggests that success or failure is a matter of individual luck or skill, rather than the result of a deeply unfair social and economic structure. If you don't succeed, it's because you weren't pretty enough, or clever enough, or you didn't find the right protector. It shifts the blame from the system onto you. You see the corrosive effect of this dream on Flora. She spends her meagre pocket money on expensive ribbons or a slightly better quality perfume, hoping to catch the eye of a wealthier client. She becomes more competitive, more ruthless with the other women, seeing them as obstacles to her grand ambition. Her obsession with the fantasy of escape makes her present reality even more miserable. For you, the stories of the great courtesans eventually become a source of quiet bitterness. They're not inspirational, they are a mockery. They highlight the pathetic nature of your own small aspirations, to earn enough to pay off your debt, to avoid disease, to perhaps one day have a room of your own. Your grandest dream is a life of quiet, respectable poverty, a life that the women you came from took for granted. The idea of a mansion in Mayfair is so absurdly out of reach it might as well be on the moon. The gulf isn't a ladder you can climb, it's a chasm you will never cross. The legends of Skittles and Cora Pearl are just pretty stories to tell in the dark. A brief, glittering distraction from the relentless, unglamorous truth of your life. The glittering, impossible dream of the grand courtesan is a fantasy you can afford to indulge in and then discard. But there are other, more immediate futures to contemplate. futures that are not fantastical at all. The most terrifying of these announces itself not with a bang, but with a quiet, unnerving silence. It begins with a pause in the familiar rhythm of your own body. The monthly reassurance, the arrival of your courses, as the other women call it, fails to appear. At first, you tell yourself it's nothing. Your life is a chaotic mess of poor sleep, cheap gin, and constant stress. It's no wonder your body is unreliable. You wait. But as 1 week bleeds into the next, a cold, creeping dread begins to take root, a fear so profound it eclipses all the others. The fear of debt, of violence, of disease. They're all suddenly secondary to this new, biological terror. In the world of the brothel, pregnancy is the ultimate calamity. It is a professional death sentence. Your body, which is your only asset, the very tool of your trade, has betrayed you. It is staging a rebellion that you cannot hide or control. The whole point of your existence in this house is to be available, to fit into the gaudy satin dresses, and to be an object of fleeting, sterile fantasy for paying men. A swelling belly, morning sickness, the exhaustion of early pregnancy. These are physical realities that cannot be powdered over or masked with a fake smile. Apparently, glowing is not a look the clientele pays extra for. You live in a state of suspended panic. Every morning you wake up and check for a sign, any sign, that it was a false alarm. Every morning you're met with the same silent, terrifying confirmation. You try to hide it. You cinch your corset ever tighter, the whalebone stays digging into your tender flesh. But you know it's a losing battle. The corset's main job is to defy biology, but this is one defiance it's not designed to win. You become paranoid, convinced that the other women are watching you, that Mrs. Gray's sharp, calculating eyes linger on your waistline for a second too long. To tell the governess would be suicide. There is no maternity leave at Mrs. Gray's establishment. She would not see a baby on the way. She would see a broken piece of equipment. Your pregnancy is a breach of an unwritten contract. You have become a liability, a useless investment. Her reaction would be swift and devoid of sentiment. She would open her ledger, tally up your total debt, for the clothes, the food, the fines, and she would cast you out onto the street with nothing. Thrown out, pregnant, and with no character reference, your only options would be the grim charity of the workhouse or a slow starvation in some forgotten alley. So you turn to the whispered folklore of the attic, the desperate medicine of last resort. The other women, if they suspect, might share secrets in hushed tones. The advice is a litany of dangerous, half-baked ideas, the 19th century equivalent of frantically searching for miracle cures online. "Drink this," Kate might whisper, pressing a foul-smelling herbal tea into your hand. It's likely brewed with pennyroyal or tansy, herbs known to be amenagogues, intended to stimulate menstruation. But in the high doses needed, they're also potent poisons. You drink it, praying for cramps, for the release that will save you. Other advice is more physical. You're told to take scalding hot baths laced with mustard powder until you are faint. You are told to try violent exercise, to lift things you shouldn't, to even consider throwing yourself down the short, steep flight of stairs to the attic. The hope is that a great shock or physical trauma will jolt your body back into its normal rhythm. When these desperate measures fail, there is only one option left, the one spoken of in the deepest whispers, the one that carries the stench of true terror and criminality. You must seek out a wise woman, a back-alley abortionist. Abortion was a mainstream topic of concern, in that it was illegal, condemned from the pulpit and the courtroom, but it was a thriving underground trade born of pure desperation. Finding such a person is a terrifying quest in itself. It requires asking guarded questions in the right places, trusting a chain of whispers that leads you to a tenement in a slum you would never otherwise enter. You take the few shillings you have managed to hide from Mrs. Gray and go on your day off, your heart pounding with every step. The woman you find is not a doctor. She's often an impoverished widow or midwife who has turned her knowledge of the female body to this illicit, dangerous work. The surgery is a grimy kitchen table. Her tools are unsterilised, her methods brutal. Historians still argue about the true nature of this underground practice, whether most women relied on these practitioners or on self-induced methods. The evidence is scarce, as the entire affair was shrouded in secrecy and shame. A quirky and horrifying tidbit is the use of slippery elm bark or other objects as a crude cervical dilator. a method almost guaranteed to cause infection and perforation. The risk of death from hemorrhage or septicemia was staggeringly high. You are literally putting your life in a stranger's unclean hands, paying them to perform a secret, dangerous magic. The choice, you realise, is not really a choice at all. It is not about a moral debate on the sanctity of life. It is about survival. You are choosing between the possibility of a quick death on a dirty table and the certainty of a slow one in the gutter. As you lie there, staring at a water-stained ceiling that looks unnervingly like the one in the blue room, you have never felt more alone. This is a secret you cannot share, a terror you must face in absolute isolation. It is the grim, hidden, and bloody pinnacle of your profession's many risks, a final, desperate gamble for your own life. The terror of a potential pregnancy, or the grim, secret aftermath of dealing with one, leaves a permanent scar on your soul. It's a stark reminder that your body is not your own, and that the future is a minefield of potential disasters. In the face of such a bleak reality, your mind learns to build its own shelters. You begin to cultivate a rich, secret life of daydreams. These fantasies are your most private and precious possession, a place where Mrs. Gray's ledger and the leering faces of clients cannot reach you. These are not the grand, impossible fantasies of becoming a courtesan like Cora Pearl. Those dreams feel too hollow, too distant. Your daydreams are smaller, quieter, and infinitely more precious for being, just perhaps, almost attainable. They are visions of a life of simple, ordinary peace. Lying on your lumpy mattress in the attic, staring at the grimy window, you let your mind drift. You conjure the image of a small shop. It's on a quiet, respectable street, away from the noise and filth of the city centre. The sign above the door, painted in neat, clean letters, says A. Harding, milliner, or perhaps seamstress. You use your real name in this fantasy. Alice has no place here. Inside, the shop is clean and smells of fresh linen and ironing, bolts of ribbon in. One of them will lead a prayer, her voice ringing with fervent sincerity in the room that usually echoes with bawdy songs and drunken laughter. The disconnect is surreal. You're instructed to bow your heads. You stare at the floor, the worn pattern of the carpet, anything to avoid making eye contact. After the prayer, they distribute small pamphlets. The pages are filled with stark warnings about eternal damnation, stories of fallen women who saw the light and repented, and promises of redemption through hard work and piety. Then comes the lecture. They speak of your life of sin, your shameful trade. They talk about the purity of womanhood, the sanctity of the home, the divine role of women as wives and mothers. Their words are meant to inspire guilt and repentance, but they're so completely detached from your reality that they have little emotional impact. They speak of choice and moral weakness, but they have no concept of the economic forces that pushed you here. They cannot imagine the cold, the hunger, the stark choice between this life and the workhouse. Their understanding of your situation is purely theoretical, gleaned from sermons and sensationalist newspaper articles. They are, in a word, clueless. You listen with a practised, passive expression, nodding occasionally. A mainstream fact of the Victorian era was the massive growth of these philanthropic and religious reform movements, a genuine and widespread response to the visible social problems of industrialisation. But good intentions did not always translate to effective or empathetic action. The most awkward part of the visit is when they try to engage you individually. One of them might sit beside you on the velvet settee, her expensive wool dress rustling, and take your hand. Her touch is meant to be sisterly, but it feels clinical, like a doctor examining a specimen. "My dear child," she will say, her voice full of condescending pity, "do you not yearn to leave this dreadful place? To lead a clean life? What can you possibly say? If you are honest, if you say that a clean life on starvation wages as a seamstress is its own kind of hell, or if you ask her if her rescue home can pay off your £2 debt to Mrs. Gray for the dress on your back, she will only see you as hardened and unrepentant. So you play the part. You look down. You murmur a quiet, "Yes, ma'am." You squeeze out a single, convincing tear if you can manage it. They will then present their solution, the Magdalene Asylum. This is their grand offer of salvation. The name sounds benevolent, but you've heard stories about these places from other women. They are little more than religious prisons. In exchange for saving you, they demand years of your life. You would be locked away, forced to perform endless, unpaid labour, usually laundry, the traditional penance for soiled women. You would be subjected to a brutal regime of prayer, silence, and moral instruction, all designed to break your spirit and remake you into a useful, subservient member of society. It's swapping one kind of cage for another, more pious one. A quirky and revealing detail about these encounters is that the reformers often seemed more interested in the salacious details of the life they were condemning than in the practical realities of your needs. They might ask probing questions about the depths of depravity, cloaked in the language of concern, their eyes gleaming with a kind of horrified fascination. Historians still argue about the true impact of these rescue missions. Did they save a significant number of women, or were they largely ineffective, more concerned with reinforcing middle-class morality than with providing real, viable alternatives? From your vantage point, they feel like a pointless interruption. They offer a solution that is just another form of exploitation, wrapped in the language of piety. When they finally leave, a collective sigh of relief ripples through the room. Mrs. Gray immediately orders the curtains drawn, shutting out the harsh daylight. The performance is over. You're free to be yourselves again, cynical, tired, but at least free from judgment. Flora might mock the reformers' solemn faces, mimicking their pious tones, and for a moment you all share a laugh born of pure derision. It's a rare moment of unity, brought on by a common enemy. The reformers came to save your souls, but all they really accomplished was to remind you how profoundly, hopelessly misunderstood you are by the very world that created you. The relentless pressure of the nightly performance, the ever-present fear of disease and debt, the crushing weight of social shame. It all takes a toll that goes deeper than mere physical exhaustion. It seeps into your mind, a slow-acting poison that corrodes your spirit. To survive, you need an escape. Your daydreams of a country cottage offer a temporary fragile shelter, but they are often not enough to numb the sharp edges of your reality. For a more immediate and powerful oblivion, you and the other women turn to the twin crutches of Victorian society, gin and laudanum. Gin is the house's lubricant, served to clients to loosen their inhibitions and their wallets. For you, it becomes something else, a reliable, fast-acting anaesthetic. A glass of gin before the first clients arrive can take the edge off your nerves, making it easier to paste on the required smile. Another glass during a difficult encounter can help you dissociate, to create a comfortable, hazy distance between your mind and your body. The cheap, fiery spirit burns on its way down, a sensation that's almost welcome, a physical pain that distracts from the emotional one. You see how easily it becomes a habit. Bess, the oldest of the women, often starts her day with a bracer of gin in her tea, her hands trembling until she has her first drink. The Governess subtly encourages this dependence. While she'll fine you for being sloppy or incoherent, a certain level of controlled intoxication is good for business. It makes you more compliant, more willing to endure, less likely to cause trouble. And of course, every glass of gin you drink is another few pence added to your tab in her ledger. She profits from your addiction just as she profits from everything else. But gin is loud and boisterous. For a quieter, more profound escape, there is laudanum. Laudanum, a potent tincture of opium dissolved in alcohol, is the great open secret of the Victorian age. It was as common as aspirin is today, a mainstream medicine available over the counter from any chemist, prescribed for everything from a cough to a toothache to female hysteria. For you, it is not medicine. It is a magic carpet that can whisk you away from the grimy attic and the suffocating parlour to a warm, fuzzy, dreamlike state where nothing can hurt you. You learn about it from Kate. One afternoon, after a particularly brutal night, she sees you sitting on your bed, staring blankly at the wall, your hands shaking. She says nothing, but simply hands you a small dark blue bottle with a glass stopper. "Just a few drops," she whispers. "In your tea, it helps." You try it. You pour a tiny amount of the thick, dark liquid into your cup. It has a bitter, medicinal taste. You drink it down, and then you wait. Within 20 minutes, a slow, pleasant warmth begins to spread through your limbs. The hard edges of the world begin to soften. The constant knot of anxiety in your stomach gently unwinds. The sounds of the house, the distant rumble of traffic, the ticking of the clock, they all fade into a soft, pleasant hum. You lie back on your lumpy mattress, and for the first time in a long time, you feel a sense of peace. It's a false peace, a chemical illusion, but it feels blessedly real. This becomes your secret ritual. A few drops before the evening begins to fortify yourself. A few more drops at the end of the night to erase the memories and allow you to sleep. You see the same small bottles hidden under the mattresses of the other women. Ellen, the quiet, sad girl, seems to rely on it heavily, often drifting through her days in a placid, semi-conscious state. The danger, of course, is immense. Opium is a powerful and highly addictive drug. The line between a therapeutic dose and a lethal one is terrifyingly thin. A quirky and tragic tidbit of the era is that coroners' reports were filled with cases of accidental laudanum overdoses, particularly among women and infants. It was a key ingredient in many popular soothing syrups for babies. The need for a larger and larger dose to achieve the same effect, the hallmark of addiction, begins subtly. A few drops become a dozen. A single dose a day becomes 2, then 3. Historians still debate the extent to which society understood the addictive nature of these substances. While the image of the literary opium eater like Thomas de Quincey existed, the everyday addiction of countless ordinary people, particularly women using it for medicinal or calming purposes, was largely unacknowledged. It was a hidden epidemic. You see the consequences in Bess. Her reliance on gin has made her loud and sloppy. But you also see the quieter, more insidious effects of laudanum in Ellen. Her eyes are often unfocused, her movements slow and languid. She has become less profitable, as clients complain that she is dull or sleepy. Mrs. Gray watches her with a cold, impatient eye. Ellen's escape is beginning to threaten her livelihood, creating a vicious cycle. The more she fears being cast out, the more she relies on the drug that is making her unemployable. You tell yourself you are different, you are careful, you only use it when you really need it. But the definition of need becomes broader every day. A rude client, a fight with Flora, a sharp word from Mrs. Gray, all become justifications for seeking the sweet, numb comfort in the little blue bottle. The daydream of the country cottage becomes harder to conjure, its simple pleasures paling in comparison to the instant guaranteed bliss of the opium tincture. You are caught between two forms of oblivion, the noisy, social numbness of alcohol and the silent, solitary peace of the opiate. Both are a slow-motion suicide, a way of erasing yourself piece by piece, night after night. They are the price you pay for a peace of mind that you can no longer find on your own. The house has its rules, its routines, and its fragile sense of order, but this order is constantly threatened by the unpredictable nature of the men who walk through the door. While most clients are manageable, sad or boorish or simply businesslike, there is always the risk of encountering a man whose desires curdle into aggression. The ever-present threat of violence is a low, constant hum beneath the surface of every interaction, a baseline of fear that you learn to live with. You have no real protection. The law, as you well know from the experience of a raid, is not on your side. Calling for help is a last resort, an admission of failure that could get you fined or fired. Mrs. Gray's hired minder, a burly ex-boxer named Thomas, who spends most of his time in the kitchen, is there to protect the house's property and profits, not your personal safety. He will intervene if a man is smashing furniture or refusing to pay, but a slap, a shove, or a cruel word directed at you is simply part of the job description. You're expected to handle it. So you learn to become an expert in de-escalation. You develop a sixth sense for danger, a sensitivity to the subtle shifts in a man's mood. You learn to read the signs, the clenched jaw, the sudden silence, the way his eyes glaze over with drink. Your entire being becomes a finely tuned barometer for male anger. When you sense a storm brewing, you instinctively deploy a range of placating behaviours. You become softer, quieter, more agreeable. You learn that a well-timed, submissive apology, even when you've done nothing wrong, can sometimes soothe a fragile ego and avert a crisis. "I'm so sorry, sir, I didn't mean to spill that drop of wine. How clumsy of me." It's a humiliating but necessary performance of self-abasement. The violence is not always physical. The verbal abuse can be just as cutting, just as damaging. Men will call you names, sneer at your background, or make cruel comments about your appearance. They do it to feel powerful, to reinforce the social chasm that separates you. They need to remind themselves and you that you are not their equal. You're a commodity they have purchased, and they believe they have the right to treat their property as they see fit. You. The hierarchy is subtle but rigid. It's based on seniority, on who has the favour of the governess, and most importantly on who is the most profitable. Bess, as the oldest, has a certain authority, but her age is also a liability. Kate is the current star, consistently earning the most. You, as the newcomer, are at the very bottom, an unknown quantity. You must navigate this treacherous social landscape carefully. Saying the wrong thing, appearing too arrogant, or complaining too much can isolate you, and in this house, isolation is dangerous. A fascinating, fringe aspect of this life is the creation of flash slang, a secret language used by those on the margins of society. You start to pick it up. A dollymop is an amateur or part-time prostitute, a term used with contempt by full-time professionals like yourselves. A punter is a client. To be in lumber means to be in trouble or in jail. This shared vocabulary, much of which is now lost to history, was another way of building a collective identity, of drawing a line between us and the respectable world that judged and used you. You witness your first real conflict a few nights in. Ellen, the quiet girl, has a favourite client, a shy young clerk who visits regularly and treats her with a semblance of kindness. One night he arrives, and Bess, feeling the pressure of a slow week, makes a deliberate play for him, using her bawdy humour to draw his attention. He is flattered and flustered, and ultimately chooses Bess. The look on Ellen's face is one of quiet devastation. Later, in the attic, you hear muffled sobs coming from her bed. No one says anything. There are no words of comfort to offer because everyone understands. Bess did what she had to do to earn her keep. It's the law of the jungle, just played out in cheap satin and bad lighting. It's a strange dynamic. These women are your colleagues, your roommates, your competition, and the only people in the entire world who understand your life. They can be your fiercest allies and your most bitter rivals. One moment, Kate is adjusting the back of your dress and whispering a piece of advice. The next, she's steering a wealthy-looking client away from you with a dazzling smile. It's a dizzying, emotionally exhausting dance. You learn to be wary, to hold a piece of yourself back. Trust is a luxury you can't afford, but total isolation is a death sentence. You must find your place in this small, damaged sorority, somewhere between camaraderie and caution. Learn to absorb these words without flinching, to let them slide off the protective shell you've built around yourself. But they do find their way in, little slivers of poison that fester in your mind long after the man has gone. Drunkenness is the most common accelerant. A man who was polite enough when he arrived can become a different creature after 3 glasses of brandy. His movements become clumsy and forceful, his voice loud and demanding. He might grab your arm too tightly, his fingers digging into your flesh, leaving bruises that you will have to hide for days. This casual, thoughtless violence is so common it's barely remarked upon. You learn to see the bruises on Kate's arms, or the faint shadow of a slap on Ellen's cheek, and say nothing. It is a shared, unspoken burden. A mainstream historical view is that while the more sensational Jack the Ripper style murders were rare, this kind of low-level routine violence was an accepted occupational hazard for prostitutes. Society largely saw these women as existing outside the bounds of normal protection and sympathy. An assault on a respectable woman was an outrage. An assault on a fallen woman was at best a minor public order offence. Then there is the threat of calculated, sober cruelty. Some men, you discover, are aroused by fear. They enjoy the power they wield over you. They will say things deliberately to frighten you, describing what they could do to you, knowing you are powerless to stop them. They might brandish a pocket knife, not with the intent to use it, but just to watch you flinch. This psychological warfare is in some ways more terrifying than a simple drunken shove. It is a deliberate, intimate act of terror. Historians still debate the motivations behind male violence in these encounters. Was it a product of the era's rigid gender roles and the Madonna whore complex, where men could unleash repressed anger on bad women that they couldn't on their pure wives? Or was it a simpler, more brutal expression of power in a society full of stark power imbalances? As a man's hand tightens on your wrist, you don't have the luxury of sociological analysis. You just have the cold, hard reality of your own fear. One night, the threat becomes real. A client, a wealthy-looking man who has been quiet and sullen all evening, follows Flora upstairs. A few minutes later, you hear a muffled scream, followed by the sound of something breaking. There is a moment of frozen silence in the parlour. Then the bell from Flora's room rings frantically. 3 short, sharp tugs. The emergency signal. Thomas, the minder, moves for the first time all night, his chair scraping back as he lumbers up the stairs. Mrs. Gray is right behind him. You and the other women huddle together, your own fears forgotten in the face of this immediate crisis. You hear a man's voice, raised and furious, then Mrs. Gray's sharp, commanding tone, and finally the sound of a scuffle. A few moments later the client is frog-marched down the stairs by Thomas, his fine suit dishevelled, his face a mask of rage. He's thrown out the front door into the street. A quirky, sad tidbit of the era was the language of flowers. Different flowers had specific meanings, a coded way to send messages. In your daydreams, your cottage garden is full of flowers that signify peace, remembrance, and hope. It's a secret garden full of a language no one else can understand. You never speak of these dreams to the other women. They are too fragile, too personal. You suspect they have their own secret worlds, their own imaginary cottages and shops. Perhaps Kate dreams of a clean, bright schoolroom in her native Ireland. Perhaps Ellen imagines a quiet life as a wife and mother, the life she was probably raised to expect. These private worlds are the last bastion of your individuality. They are the stories you tell yourself to survive the story you're forced to live. You close your eyes, take a deep breath, and for a few precious minutes, you're not a fallen woman in a London brothel. You are a shopkeeper. You are a gardener. You are free. Just when you think you have adapted to the strange nocturnal rhythms of the house, a new and entirely different kind of intruder breaches the walls. They don't arrive at night, like the clients. They come in the stark, unforgiving light of day. They are the moralists, the reformers, the saviours of fallen women. They come armed not with money and lust, but with religious tracts, pious platitudes, and an unshakable sense of their own righteousness. Their visits are usually presaged by a shift in Mrs. Gray's demeanour. She will become irritable, her voice sharper than usual. She despises the reformers, but she cannot simply turn them away. Many of these moral crusades were led by influential, well-connected people. To be seen as actively obstructing their good work could bring unwanted attention and scrutiny from the authorities, upsetting the delicate balance of her arrangement with the local police. So, with a sigh of weary resignation, she allows them in. You and the other women are assembled in the parlour, which looks particularly garish and tawdry in the daylight streaming through the windows the governess has been forced to uncurtain. You're not in your work clothes, but in simple, drab dresses provided for these occasions. You're instructed to look humble, penitent, and receptive. It's another performance, but the audience is entirely different. The reformers are often a pair of sombre-looking women, usually middle-aged and dressed in severe, dark clothing. They belong to one of the dozens of charitable organisations dedicated to your rescue, such as the London Society for the Protection of Young Females or a local branch of a Magdalen asylum. They enter the room with an air of grim determination, their faces a mixture of pity and revulsion. They look at you not as individuals, but as a collective stain on the moral fabric of the city. You are a project, a soul to be saved. Soft, gentle colours, pale blues and dusky pinks, not the garish scarlets and yellows of your work gowns, are stacked neatly on shelves. You imagine yourself behind the counter, dressed in a simple grey dress with a clean white apron. Your hair is pinned up neatly, not in the elaborate, alluring style you're forced to wear at night. In this daydream, women from the neighbourhood come in. They're wives, mothers, respectable women. They speak to you with kindness. They admire your handiwork, the neatness of your stitches on a bonnet, the skill with which you can alter a bodice. They pay you for your work and the money feels clean. It is money you have earned with your own 2 hands, with a skill you are proud of. At the end of the day you lock the shop door and you go upstairs to a small, clean room that is all your own. There is a single bed with white sheets, a rocking chair by the window, and a pot of geraniums on the sill. You can read a book, or just sit and listen to the quiet. You are safe. You are anonymous. You are respectable. Sometimes the fantasy shifts. You're no longer in the city. You've escaped London entirely and returned to the countryside. Not your old home. That place is tainted by the memories of poverty and loss. This is a new place, a small whitewashed cottage with a thatched roof. It has a little garden in the back where you grow vegetables and herbs. You can smell damp earth and rain-washed leaves, not coal smoke and gin. You keep a few chickens. The work is hard, tending the garden, mending the roof. carrying water from the well, but it is honest, physical labour that leaves you tired in a good way, not soul-sick and exhausted. In this dream, you are older. Your face has lines, but they are from smiling in the sun, not from grimacing in the gaslight. You are alone, but not lonely. You have yourself, and you have your peace. These daydreams are constructed from fragments of your past and slivers of lives you glimpse on the street. You see a woman buying flowers from a street vendor, and you borrow her quiet dignity for your fantasy. You see a family having a picnic in one of the parks, and you steal their easy laughter. It's a collage of normalcy, a world you can almost touch. A historical fact is that for many women who managed to leave the trade, a common path was indeed opening a small business like a millinery shop, a pub, or a lodging house. It was one of the few avenues where a woman with a small amount of capital and no character reference could become her own boss. This kernel of reality is what makes your daydream so potent and so painful. It's not entirely impossible. It just requires the one thing you don't have: capital. Historians still argue about the function of hope in such desperate circumstances. Was it a crucial motivator that fueled survival, or was it a form of self-torture that only highlighted the misery of the present? For you, it is both. These daydreams are a lifeline. They're a mental space where you can reclaim your identity, your agency, and your future. They remind you that you are more than what is done to you. But they also make the return to reality all the more jarring. When Polly brings up the watery stew for your evening meal, crashing you out of your fantasy cottage, the bleakness of the attic feels 10 times more acute. The contrast between your imaginary life and your real one is a constant dull ache. To speak to a companion, terrified of being associated with you in public. You learn to lower your own gaze, to make yourself small and invisible, to avoid causing a scene that would only bring trouble on yourself. You're a dirty secret that must not be acknowledged in the light of day. This shunning is not just from strangers. It extends to the world you came from. You cannot go home. To return to your village would be to bring unimaginable shame upon your family. What would you say? How could you explain where you have been, where the money for your new dress came from? The letters you write home, if you write at all, are filled with lies. You tell your mother you have a good position as a lady's maid, that you are well fed and happy. You might enclose a few shillings, claiming it's a bonus from your kind employer, knowing that the money was earned in a way that would break her heart. This gulf of deceit separates you from your past, cutting you off from the one source of unconditional love you have ever known. Even the simple act of shopping is fraught with peril. When you enter a shop, the owner's eyes narrow. He recognizes your type. He might serve you, but his manner will be brusque, suspicious. He watches your hands, assuming you are a thief. The price he quotes you might be higher than the one he would quote a respectable woman. This is the shame tax, the invisible surcharge you pay for existing. A mainstream fact of the period is the social phenomenon of the great social evil, a term that framed prostitution as a singular, monstrous problem, effectively dehumanizing the women involved and making this kind of public discrimination socially acceptable. You find yourself gravitating towards the spaces where the lines are more blurred, the parts of the city where other outcasts gather. You might walk in the less fashionable parks, or browse the street markets where no one asks too many questions. You find a strange sense of comfort in the anonymity of a crowd, but it is the comfort of being one of many ghosts, unseen and unheard. A quirky and sad aspect of this isolation was the development of a unique social life among the women themselves. On your shared day off, you might pool your meagre pocket money with Kate or Flora to buy a meat pie and a bottle of beer and have a picnic in a grimy city square. These moments of stolen fun are defiant and pathetic at the same time. You're play-acting at normalcy, creating a fragile bubble of community in a world that wants to keep you apart. You laugh a little too loudly, your jokes are a little too cynical, but for a few hours, you are not just colleagues in misery, you are friends. Historians still debate the psychological impact of this profound social stigma. Did it crush women's spirits entirely, or did it foster a powerful countercultural identity, a sense of us against the world? The truth is a painful mix of both. The constant rejection and contempt wear you down, reinforcing the sense of worthlessness that the job itself cultivates. You begin to internalize the shame. to believe that you are as dirty and disposable as society tells you that you are. Yet there is also a flicker of defiance, a shared cynical glance with Flora when a society lady pulls her skirts away from you is a small act of rebellion, a silent acknowledgement that you see the hypocrisy of it all. As the sun begins to set, you make your way back to the brothel. Stepping back through the front door brings a strange and conflicted sense of relief. Inside these walls, you're still exploited, still trapped, but at least you're not an outcast. You have a place. The world outside, the respectable world, has made it painfully clear that it has no room for you. The house is your prison, but in a strange and terrible way, it has also become your only refuge from a society that wishes you would simply disappear. Time in the brothel moves in a strange circular pattern. The days blur into a repeating cycle of waking, waiting, and working. Weeks are marked only by Mrs. Gray's settling up on Sunday, and seasons are noted by the damp chill or suffocating heat in the attic. In this monotonous loop, it's easy to lose track of your own linear progression, but time is passing, and it is a cruel, relentless accountant. The cruelty of the passing years is a slow-dawning horror, a reality that gradually pierces through the haze of gin and laudanum. Your profession is built on a foundation of youth. Youth is your primary commodity, the thing that made you a desirable new girl when you first arrived. In the twisted marketplace of the parlour, youth equals freshness, novelty, and an aspagined purity that clients pay to tarnish. But youth is a fleeting asset, and its value depreciates with every passing day. You begin to notice the small, terrifying signs of aging, magnified and distorted by the harsh realities of your life. You look in the small, cloudy mirror in the attic and see things that weren't there a year ago. There are fine lines forming at the corners of your eyes, not from laughter, but from squinting in the dim light, and from the perpetual tension you carry in your face. There are faint bluish shadows under your eyes that no amount of sleep can erase, a permanent stain of fatigue. The physical toll of the work is immense. The poor diet, the constant consumption of alcohol, the lack of fresh air and sunshine, it all conspires to dull your hair, to rob your skin of its healthy glow. The corsets, worn for hours on end, night after night, have begun to reshape your very posture, and you sometimes feel a dull ache in your ribs that never quite goes away. Your body, your only tool, is showing signs of wear and tear. You see your own future reflected in the faces of the older women in the house. You look at Bess. She was once, you're told, the star of the house, as sought after as Kate is now. She still has a bawdy charm and a quick wit, but there is a desperation that clings to her. She has to work harder now, laugh louder, sing more energetically, wear more rouge, to compete with the younger women. She's often left sitting on the settee long after you and Kate have been chosen. You see the flash of bitterness in her eyes when a regular client of hers opts for a newer face. She's running a race against time that she's destined to lose. The fear of becoming Bess is a powerful motivator. It fuels the rivalry between you, Kate, and Flora. You're all acutely aware that you're on a ticking clock. This awareness changes how you view your work. It's no longer just about surviving the night. It's about maximising your value while you still have it. You might take more risks, agree to see a client you would have otherwise avoided, all in a desperate attempt to earn a little more, to put a few extra shillings aside before your currency is completely devalued. A mainstream historical fact is that the average age of a prostitute in Victorian London was shockingly young, typically in the late teens or early 20s. A woman of 30 was often considered old in the trade, her career largely over. This brutal reality created a constant churn, with new younger women constantly being pulled in from the provinces to replace those who had aged out, fallen ill, or died. You start to hear Mrs. Gray's comments sharp as shards of glass. "Alice, you're looking tired tonight. We can't have that." Or, directed at Bess, "You'll need to make more of an effort if you expect to earn your keep." The governess is not sentimental. She's a businesswoman, and her inventory must remain fresh. The unspoken threat is always there. When you're no longer profitable, you will be replaced. A quirky and sad aspect of this was the desperate attempt to fight the aging process with useless or harmful quack remedies. Women would buy expensive face creams that promised to erase wrinkles, many of which contained toxic ingredients like lead or mercury. They might use drops of belladonna to dilate their pupils, believing it made them look younger and more alluring, a practice that could lead to vision problems. Remember the burnt matchstick for eyeliner? These are its sad cousins in the fight against time. Historians still debate the career trajectories of these women. While some sensationalist accounts suggest a rapid and inevitable decline into disease and early death, social historians have pieced together evidence suggesting more varied, though still difficult, paths. Some women did manage to save enough to leave the trade, some married, and some transitioned into other roles, like becoming a madam themselves. But for many, the passing years simply meant a slow slide down the hierarchy. You witnessed this slide firsthand. A woman might leave a mid-tier house like Mrs. Gray's not because she has escaped, but because she's no longer wanted. She will then have to find a place in a cheaper, more dangerous brothel in a poorer part of the city, catering to a rougher clientele for less money. From there, the next step down is a common lodging house, where she might sell herself for a few pennies just to pay for a bed for the night. The final step is the street, the cold cobbles, where she is at the mercy of everyone. This trajectory is a ghost story told in the attic, a cautionary tale that haunts your every waking moment. You look at your own reflection, at the 20-year-old face that feels 1,000 years old, and you wonder how many years you have left. How long until your smile looks too forced. Flora is brought down to the kitchen. Her lip is split and bleeding, and there is a large dark bruise already forming on her cheek. She is shaking uncontrollably, but Mrs. Gray's concern is not for Flora. It's for her business. "What did you do to provoke him?" she demands, her voice cold. Flora, sobbing, insists she did nothing. The governess examines the damage to Flora's face with a critical, appraising eye, as if inspecting a chipped piece of china. "You're no use to me looking like that," she says, her tone devoid of sympathy. "You'll stay in the attic until that heals." Flora is not just a victim, she is now a financial liability. She will not earn a penny, but her debt for board and lodging will continue to grow. This is the ultimate insult, to be punished for the violence inflicted upon you. You help Flora up the stairs to the attic, her body trembling against yours. You fetch her a cloth and a basin of cold water. In that moment, the rivalries and jealousies between you melt away. There is only a shared, silent understanding. What happened to Flora could have happened to any of you. Tonight, it was her. Tomorrow, it could be you. The house is not a sanctuary. It is a hunting ground, and you are the prey. The brothel, with its drawn curtains and gaslit interior, is a self-contained world. Within its walls you have a role, a routine, and a strange, fraught community. But the moment you step outside into the daylight, you are stripped of even that precarious status. You become an outsider, a pariah, marked by an invisible brand that seems to burn on your forehead. The social isolation of your profession is as profound and suffocating as any physical confinement. Your time off is limited, perhaps one afternoon a week. On that day, you can leave the house, but you are not truly free. You're still wearing clothes that belong to Mrs. Gray, not the gaudy evening gowns, but a simple drab day dress she provides. It's another uniform, one designed to make you inconspicuous, but you feel as if you're wearing a costume of shame. Walking down a busy London street in the daytime is a jarring experience. The city that is your workplace at night becomes a hostile, alien landscape. The rules are different here. You see respectable women walking with their husbands or children. They might be wearing dresses of a similar cut to yours, but they carry themselves with an air of confident ownership of the space they occupy. When their eyes happen to fall on you, their expression changes. You see a flicker of curiosity followed by contempt, and then a swift, deliberate looking away. They will often pull their children a little closer, as if your very presence is a form of contamination. You're a walking, breathing reminder of the sordid reality that underpins their husbands' and fathers' world, and they despise you for it. Men, too, look at you differently in the daylight. The same men who might pay for your company at night will now pretend they don't see you. If your eyes happen to meet those of a former client on the street, a flash of panic will cross his face. He will immediately look away, perhaps turning. If you can't become a madam and you can't find a husband, what is left? You can try to re-enter the respectable working world, but how? You have no savings. You have a gap of several years in your history that you cannot explain. Most importantly, you have no character. The all-important reference from a previous employer that was the passport to any decent job. Without it, the doors to domestic service or shop work are firmly closed. You might find work in the most brutal, low-paying sectors, a laundry, a factory, or back to the sweatshop stitching shirts. But you would be earning starvation wages, living in squalor, and you would be doing it with a body and spirit already broken by years in the trade. This leads to the most dreaded destination of all, the workhouse. The spike, as it's grimly called. This is the place where the destitute, the aged, and the chronically ill are sent when they have no one and nothing left. It is the state's solution to poverty, and it is a solution built on punishment and deterrence. The stories you've heard are horrific. Families are separated upon entry. You're stripped of your clothes and your name, given a rough uniform and a number. The food is meagre and foul. The work is mind-numbingly pointless and physically exhausting. Picking oakum, teasing apart old tarry ropes, or breaking stones. The discipline is rigid, the atmosphere one of profound, soul-crushing despair. To enter the workhouse is to admit ultimate defeat. It is to surrender your identity and become a ward of a cruel, uncaring state. It is a living death. A quirky, dark tidbit of slang from the underclass was referring to the workhouse as the tea and sugar warehouse, because you'd be stored there until you expired. It's a grim joke, a testament to the horror the institution inspired. Historians still debate the efficacy and humanity of the New Poor Law of 1834 which cemented the workhouse system. Was it a necessary evil to manage rampant poverty, or a cruel and punitive institution designed to punish people for being poor? Standing on the precipice of such a future, you have no doubt about the answer. So these are your choices: a slim chance of becoming an exploiter, a slimmer chance of a precarious marriage, a return to crushing poverty, or the ultimate degradation of the workhouse. And woven through all these possibilities is the ever-present threat of simply not surviving at all, of succumbing to disease, to a botched abortion, to violence, or to the slow suicide of gin and laudanum. You look around the attic at the other women. You're all on the same sinking ship, contemplating the same few leaky lifeboats. The hope that once sustained you, the daydream of the little shop, begins to feel like a childish fantasy. It is replaced by a cold, hard pragmatism. The question is no longer, how do I find happiness, but how do I survive? You begin to see your life not as a story with a beginning, middle, and end, but as a series of calculations and gambles, with the odds stacked overwhelmingly against you. The future is no longer a country of hope. It is a barren landscape of grimly realistic and terrifying possibilities. Your eyes too tired. How long until Mrs. Gray looks at you and sees not an asset but a liability? The cruelty of the passing years is that they don't just steal your youth. They steal your hope, replacing it with the cold, hard calculus of your own diminishing value. The gnawing anxiety about aging forces a question you have been trying desperately to avoid. What happens next? The future, which you once filled with daydreams of quiet cottage gardens, now feels like a dark, narrowing corridor with only a few possible doors at the end. None of them lead to the life you once imagined. You begin to contemplate the few, bleak paths that are realistically available to a woman in your position. The first, and in some ways most ambitious path, is to become a governess yourself. You watch Mrs. Gray, her authority, her financial control, her relative safety from the direct risks of the trade, and you can see the appeal. To be the one holding the ledger, not the one whose life is dictated by it. To be the one collecting the profits, not the one drowning in debt. It is the ultimate poacher-turned-gamekeeper transition. You see the skills required. You would need a ruthless business sense, a talent for managing people, and the ability to maintain a delicate relationship with the law. Bess sometimes talks about it. If I could just get a bit of capital together, she'll muse, I'd run a house better than this one. I'd be fairer to the girls. But you all know it's a pipe dream. Capital is the magic ingredient, the one thing the entire system is designed to prevent you from accumulating. And even if a woman did manage to save enough, she would be entering a fiercely competitive and dangerous world. To succeed, she would likely have to become just as exploitative as the madam she once worked for. She would have to be the one to charge exorbitant rates for board, to levy fines, to turn a blind eye to a client's cruelty. This path offers a kind of survival, but at the cost of your soul, assuming you have any left to sell. The second path is marriage. This sounds like the ultimate escape, the happy ending of a penny dreadful novel. In theory, a man could fall in love with you, rescue you from this life, and make you a respectable wife. It happens, you hear. A client, perhaps one of the sad, lonely ones, might become attached. He He might make promises, but you quickly learn to be cynical about these offers. More often than not, they're just another line, another fantasy the man is spinning for himself. And even if an offer is genuine, what kind of man knowingly marries a prostitute in this era? He's likely to be an outcast himself, or a man who will hold your past over you like a weapon for the rest of your life. You would be trading one form of servitude for another, your duties shifting from the parlour to the kitchen, but your powerlessness remaining the same. A mainstream historical fact is that while some prostitutes did marry, they often married men from the same social class or men who were clients, and the marriages were frequently unstable. It was not the clean fairy tale escape that fiction promised. The grim abstract of your possible futures becomes terrifyingly concrete one Tuesday afternoon. The catalyst is Ellen, the quiet, sad girl who has been fading for months, retreating deeper and deeper into her laudanum-fueled haze. She has become a ghost in the house, her movements slow, her eyes perpetually clouded. She's no longer earning her keep. The clients, even the new ones, pass her over for the more vibrant present women. She has become a bad investment, and Mrs. Gray's patience has finally run out. The governess calls Ellen down to her office. The rest of you in the attic fall silent. You don't need to hear the words to know what is happening. This is the brothel's equivalent of being fired, but it's so much worse. It is an excommunication. A few minutes later, Ellen trudges back up the stairs, her face pale and utterly blank. Her expression is not one of anger or sadness, but of complete hollow resignation. She wants me out, she says, her voice a flat monotone. By tonight. The news lands with a thud in the quiet room. This is not like a raid, a temporary disruption from which you will recover. This is a final, irreversible departure, and it is not a rescue. No moral reformers have come to whisk her away to a Magdalen asylum. No handsome benefactor has arrived to set her up in a private apartment. She is simply being discarded. A frantic, quiet energy fills the attic. Flora, surprisingly, is the first to act. The rivalry between you all vanishes in the face of this shared crisis. This is the unspoken rule of your strange sorority. When one of you truly goes under, you try to throw her a rope, however thin. Flora goes to her own small wooden chest and pulls out a woolen shawl, one she bought with a rare windfall. "Here," she says, pressing it into Ellen's hands. It's getting cold out. Kate adds a pair of mended stockings. You find a half-eaten loaf of bread from your last day off excursion and wrap it in a cloth. These are meagre offerings, pathetic tokens against the cold indifference of the world Ellen is about to enter. But they are all you have. It's a collective gesture of solidarity, a desperate attempt to arm her for the impossible battle ahead. You're not just giving her a shawl and some bread, you're giving her the last shreds of humanity the house has to offer. Ellen packs her few personal belongings into a small cloth bundle. The sight is heartbreaking. There is so little to show for her years in this house. A worn-out hairbrush, a copy of A Penny Dreadful, a few faded ribbons. She has worked for years, endured countless humiliations, and she's leaving with less than she had when she arrived. Her debt to Mrs. Gray is, of course, unpayable. She is forfeiting the deposit on her own life. As she gets ready to leave, you see the true, grim foreshadowing of your own potential end. You look at Ellen, and you see yourself in a few years. You see a body weakened by the trade, a spirit dulled by opiates, a woman deemed no longer useful by the ruthless economics of the... Ellen's ghost haunts the house, not her actual spirit, but the vacuum she left behind, a space that was immediately filled by another girl, Mary. Mary is from somewhere up north, her accent thick and her eyes wide with the same terrified hope you remember feeling. It feels like watching a film of your own arrival. The other women treat her with a weary kindness, showing her how to lace her corset and warning her about Mrs. Gray's temper, but there is a distance. No one wants to get too close to the new lamb being led to the slaughter. It's adorable, in a doomed sort of way. You look at Mary and you see your past. You look at Bess, who now relies more heavily on gin to fuel her frantic, fading charm, and you see your future. You're suspended in the grim present, a purgatory between a memory and a warning. Ellen's parting gift, the bottle of laudanum, sits at the bottom of your small wooden chest, cold and heavy. You haven't opened it. Not yet. It feels like a final move in a game you're not yet ready to concede. The work has become rote, an unconscious set of actions. The performance is no longer a performance. It is a reflex. You descend to the parlour, you smile, You pour the drinks, you laugh at the jokes. You go upstairs, you detach your mind, you wash, you return. The person who does these things is Alice, a machine built of flesh and bone and cheap sateen. The you that remembers a life before this, the girl who loved the smell of rain on soil, is a faint, receding echo. Sometimes you try to recall her face, your own real face, and the image is blurry, like a photograph left out in the sun. Your daydreams of the cottage have faded. The energy required to build and maintain that fantasy world is gone. Your mind, seeking shelter, now finds it in emptiness, in a quiet, grey nothingness. You've become a part of the house's grim decor, as permanent and as silent as the water stains on the ceiling or the velvet curtains that smell of 1,000 cigars. This isn't exactly the career path with a 401k they failed to mention back home. One evening, the parlour is abuzz with talk of a scandal. A crusading journalist, a man named W.T. Stead, has published a series of articles called The Maiden Tribute of Modern Babylon. He has exposed the dark underbelly of child prostitution, shocking the respectable world with tales of corruption and depravity. The gentlemen who visit your parlour discuss it with a mixture of outrage and titillation. Dreadful business, one of them says, shaking his head before turning to Mrs. Gray to inquire about the price of the new girl, Mary. The hypocrisy is so profound, so complete, that you feel nothing at all. It's like listening to men complain about the rain while standing on a boat that is actively sinking. They're talking about a world you inhabit, but their words are for each other, a performance of moral concern that has nothing to do with you. You are invisible. The only real intimacy left is the language of coughs in the dead of night. From your bed in the attic you can identify each woman by the sound. Kate's is a shallow, dry hack. Bess's is a wet, chesty rattle, worsened by the gin. The new girl, Mary, has a persistent tickle in her throat, the kind that comes from the city's foul air. It's a grim nightly roll call, a way of checking that, while the real business of the house happens in the small, anonymous rooms upstairs, the engine of that business is the parlour. It is the showroom, the waiting room, and the stage. And you are not just a silent decoration within it. You are an active and mandatory participant in its continuous, exhausting performance of gaiety. Mrs. Gray understands that men come not just for the physical act, but for the atmosphere. They want to feel like they are at a party, a secret, exclusive club where they are the most important person in the room. Creating and maintaining this illusion is a core part of your job. Failure to participate is not an option. If you're not with a client, you cannot simply sit quietly in a corner. That is being morose, an offence punishable by a fine. You must be on at all times. This means laughing, talking, and contributing to the general din of manufactured fun. You learn to develop a parlour personality, a public-facing version of yourself that is charming, witty, or at least appears to be, and endlessly agreeable. The centrepiece of this forced jollity is the pianoforte. Bess, with her heavy-handed but energetic playing, is the house's official musician. She cycles through a repertoire of popular music hall tunes, drinking songs and sentimental ballads. You are all expected to sing along. At first, you mouth the words, your voice barely a whisper, but a sharp look from Mrs. Gray forces you to join the chorus. You sing about cheeky lads, rosy-cheeked lasses, and the joys of a pint of ale, themes so far removed from your own reality that the act of singing them feels like a cruel joke. Yet, you sing. You clap along. You tap your feet to the rhythm. The songs themselves are a key part of the experience. They are often filled with double entendres and winking allusions to the very business you're engaged in. A mainstream feature of Victorian popular culture was the music hall, and its songs often walked a fine line between family entertainment and ribald humour. Tunes like "After the Ball is Over" might be followed by a much cheekier ditty that would never be sung in a respectable drawing room. The men love this. It makes them feel like they are part of a secret, risque world. For you, singing lyrics about the joys of a jolly life is an exercise in profound cognitive dissonance. When not singing, you are expected to engage the gentleman in conversation. This requires a delicate touch. You must be interesting, but not too intelligent, engaging, but not challenging. You learn to ask leading questions that allow them to talk about themselves. You feign fascination with their tedious jobs in shipping or insurance. You develop a series of stock responses, a mental script you can deploy on demand. It's like being a talk show host in a corset. with the added pressure that a bad performance can cost you your night's earnings. Games are another part of the parlour ritual. A pack of greasy playing cards is always on hand. You might be roped into a loud, chaotic game of whist or rummy. You're expected to be a good sport, to lose gracefully to the clients, to squeal with mock dismay when you get a bad hand. Sometimes a gentleman will bring a bottle of good brandy or a box of cigars to share. Everyone is still breathing, that the house's assets are still viable. This fringe, pathetic form of connection is all that remains of the sisterhood you once felt. Historians still argue about the end of these women's stories, piecing together fragments from court records, workhouse ledgers, and coroners' reports. The vast majority simply disappear from the historical record, their lives fading into statistical noise. They become numbers in a report on venereal disease, or a nameless body pulled from the Thames. The system that used them up had no interest in recording their fate. You're beginning to understand that disappearance. It is not a sudden event, but a slow, gradual process of erasure. You're fading now, even as you sit here. Your hopes have been extinguished one by one. Your body is a tool that is slowly wearing out. Your name is a convenience. The memories that made you are becoming thin and transparent. Soon there will be another new girl, and you'll be the one they look at to see their future. You will be the one with the hollow eyes, and the dependence on a substance to get through the night. And one day, Mrs. Gray's cold, appraising eye will fall on you, and she will see a liability. You will pack your small bundle, and you will walk out the door, and you will become another one of Ellen's ghosts, another anonymous woman swallowed by the London fog. Your life, which once felt like a grand, tragic story, has shrunk to a single fading sentence in a book no one will ever read. You have become a shadow, waiting for the light to finally go out. And so, her story, and the story of countless women like her, dissolves into the quiet of the past. The character of you, the girl from the country who became a prisoner of the city, can finally rest. The relentless noise of the parlour fades, the chill of the attic warms, and the weight of the world she carried on her young shoulders is at last lifted, leaving only a profound and gentle silence. Her name is not recorded in any grand history book. No stone marks her grave. She's a whisper in the long, sad and resilient story of those who have lived on the margins, a testament to a life endured against impossible odds. And now that endurance is over. The struggle is done. All that is left is peace. As the gaslights of Victorian London flicker and die in your mind, become aware of the gentle dark of your own room. Feel the softness of your own pillow, the warmth of your own blankets. The ghosts of that other time are receding, fading back into the pages of history where they belong, leaving you safe and sound in the quiet comfort of the present. Let the rhythm of your own breathing be a soft, steady anchor, pulling you gently away from that world of shadow and into the peaceful, welcoming depths of your own slumber. Just let it all go now. It's over. Time to drift. Time to sleep.